Chapter 1082. Stop him! Stop him! The other party was shocked when he saw that, and he hid in the middle army camp without saying a word. Kill! Countless people charged at Yi Chen fearlessly. Get lost! Yi Chen stomped his foot on the ground, causing the entire ground to shake violently. The crowd that was charging at him fell to the ground. He did not slow down as he charged toward the armored man hiding in the middle army camp step by step. Protect me! Protect me! The other party shouted. Countless people charged at him again. Hundreds of people died at Yi Chen's hands with every step he took. His white hair danced wildly, and his gaze was as scary as a knife. It could be said that the scene had turned into a sea of blood and a mountain of corpses. Blood flowed like a river, and the pungent smell of blood was suffocating. He defeated an army of 10,000 alone. He's too terrifying. Is this person still human? Everyone was so shocked that they couldn't say a word. Boom! After Yi Chen charged into the middle army camp and killed thousands of people, the armored man wanted to run without saying a word. Die! Yi Chen grabbed the ground and a halberd flew up directly. Subsequently, it charged at the former. Many people tried to stop him. However, the halberd pierced through his body and shot at the armored man like a bunch of grasshoppers. No! The other party roared unwillingly. Boom! The halberd pierced through him directly, and its momentum did not decrease. It crossed a distance of 3,000 meters and was finally nailed to a mountain peak. Dead silence, the world was dead silent. Everyone's eyes were fixed on the slightly skinny figure who was carrying a little girl in his arms. Under the protection of so many people, their general was killed by Yi Chen forcefully. Mr. Yi Lu Feng was stunned on the spot. He felt his mind rumble. T2 powerful. The woman in black, Yun Yi, was surprised and delighted. She immediately shouted, "Those who surrender will not be killed. Those who surrender will not be killed." Shuang also reacted and roared at the top of his lungs. He was so excited that he almost fainted. Victory! They had won. Yi Chen broke through the army alone and killed the enemy's general among so many troops. There was nothing more shocking than this. Bang, bang, bang! The tens of thousands of soldiers, who had long been scared out of their wits, threw down the weapons in their hands and knelt on the ground. Plop! Thump! In the end, the black mass of people all knelt on the ground, without exception. I know that all of you have been deceived by the 8 kings, which is why you have been disrespectful to me. Yuni looked around, striking while the iron was hot. But now that Lu Qing is dead, all of you should rein in your horses before it's too late, and help Ai Jiao eliminate the country's traitors, to atone for your crimes. Even though her voice was slightly weak, it was extremely clear, and it resounded through the heavens and the earth without missing a single word. As her voice fell, then someone said in a trembling voice, "Long live the Empress Dowager, long live His Majesty." Boom, boom, boom. Long live the Empress Dowager, long live His Majesty. A low and deep thunderous roar resounded from the sea of people that continued to rise and fall. Yuni felt a lump in her throat and was about to cry. Then, she lifted her head to look at Yi Chen, who was far away. It was him. He helped me resolve this fatal situation. Otherwise, I would have died in this chaotic army today. Shuang reminded her at the right time, "Empress Dowager, there's no time to lose. We should hurry back to the capital to avoid any accidents." Although Yi Chen had broken through the army, no one could guarantee that the 8 kings would not send reinforcements. Although Yi Chen was extremely brave, he would exhaust his strength sooner or later. Once they were surrounded again, it would be very difficult for them to survive. "All right." Yuni took a deep breath in and calmed herself down before saying, "Generals, listen up, protect me back to the capital." Following that, Lu Fei volunteered to gather the tens of thousands of troops. After all, she was the daughter of Langia County. She had been nurtured by the art of war since she was young, and she had personally led troops when she grew up. The tens of thousands of remnant troops were very cooperative under her command. They surrounded Yi Chen and Yun Yi and rushed toward Longjing. None of the onlookers dared to stop them. Yi Chen's invincibility had completely shocked them. Even though they had the orders of the 8 kings, no one dared to attack. Sect leader, are we just going to let them go? A disciple of a sword sect looked at the green-robed old man in front of him and said unwillingly, "Apart from that, do we have any other choice?" The green-robed old man smiled bitterly. He killed 5 martial masters in a row and defeated 10,000 troops by himself. He must be a martial king. If we attack, we will only die. But the 8 kings, a hint of respect flashed through that person's eyes. The green-robed old man sighed softly, passed down the order. Run for your lives. With this person here, our sect will not fall into chaos. The 8 kings will also fail on the verge of success. The sky was completely bright. In the central camp, Yi Chen sat on the carriage while holding a spirit stone in his hand to replenish the true origin energy in his body. Lu Fei, Yun Yi, Shuiying, and the rest sat quietly at the side, not daring to make a sound, afraid that they would disturb him. After a while, Yi Chen opened his eyes slowly as the last spirit stone shattered. "Mr. Yi, are you all right?" Almost at that moment, the 3 of them spoke at the same time. "I'm fine." Yi Chen shook his head lightly. He looked at his daughter who was in Yun Yi's arms and said, "How long until we get to the capital?" Yun Yi immediately bowed and said, "Mr. Yi, we've already passed the Wangjing River. We're less than 20 kilometers away. I've fulfilled my promise." Yi Chen looked at her and said expressionlessly, "I hope you can fulfill your promise when you return to the capital." At this point, his tone was a little cold. "Of course, you can go back on your word. However, your great dynasty will no longer exist. I can save you or kill you." Yun Yi's heart tightened when she heard that. She shook her head immediately and said, "Mr. Yi has done me and the imperial court a great favor. If I go back on my word, how am I different from an animal?" Yi Chen nodded. At that moment the carriage suddenly stopped. A general's voice came from outside. "Empress Dowager, Commander Ma is here to welcome you." "Where is he?" Yun Yi said seriously. The man said, "He's at Changning-Tai 5 kilometers away." "All right, you may leave now." Yun Yi's eyelashes trembled slightly. Then, she suddenly said to Lu Fei and Shuiying who were next to her, "Both of you may leave. I have something to say to Mr. Yi." Lu Fei did not dare to hesitate. Only Shuiying felt that it would be inappropriate for the Empress Dowager to be alone with Yi Chen. However, he did not say anything in the end. After the 2 of them left, Yun Yi inhaled slightly. Yun Yi took a deep breath. Her phoenix eyes, hidden under the veil, were a little complicated. The commander of the Imperial Guards, Ma Yuanxuan, was here. It meant that she was truly safe and would arrive at the palace in a moment. However, she suddenly felt a little reluctant. To be precise, she resisted. Once she returned to the palace, she would be the supreme Empress Dowager of the great dynasty. By then, no matter what she said or did, she would be supervised by everyone. End of this chapter. Chapter 1083. She could not help but look at Yi Chen quietly as she thought to this point. For some reason, she suddenly had the urge not to return to the palace. She just wanted to follow the carriage forever. She did not know where this thought came from. Perhaps it was because of the man before her. He had saved her and escorted her all the way. His figure had completely walked into the depths of her heart. Yi Chen sensed her gaze and secretly frowned. "Is there anything else?" Yun Yi did not say a word. A few seconds later, she raised her hand and slowly removed the veil on her face. Instantly, a breathtakingly beautiful face was completely exposed to the air. She lifted her eyes slightly and looked at Yi Chen. The latter's eyes were also dazed for a moment. It was a pair of indescribably beautiful eyes. It was as if all the clear blue waves in the world were condensed in them. Her skin was like jade, and her tall nose seemed to be carved from the most precious white marble. Her red lips were like the most delicate flower buds in time. She was beautiful without any worldly aura. She was noble and approachable. Seeming to have sensed the shock in his eyes, a bright redness swiftly rose on her pure white face. Yun-yi lowered her head almost subconsciously. Ever since the court, she had been wearing a veil and had never revealed her true appearance to the outside world. However, there was an uncontrollable force in her heart that forced her to take the initiative to show Yi Chen the most beautiful scene of herself. She did not know why she was doing this. She even felt like a deer was running wild in her heart. Mr. Yi, my name is Yun-yi. I grew up in the Yeo court since I was young. I have no parents. My identity was originally lowly. It was the late emperor who did not mind my sins and made me a concubine. Who would have thought that the late emperor would not marry me? That night the late emperor passed away. Yun-yi opened her red lips and slowly told him about her background. I thought I would follow the ancient tradition and enter the imperial mausoleum to be buried with the late emperor. However, I was chosen by the Grand Master to be the Empress Dowager. I don't know anything about national affairs, but I have to intervene in politics on behalf of the new emperor. I only wanted to wait for the new emperor to come of age before living in seclusion in the temple and accompanying the ancient Buddha. However, I was involved in the undercurrent of the 8 kings. Yi Chen listened quietly and did not say anything. His expression was as calm as usual. After an unknown period of time, Shui Ying's voice came from outside. Empress Dowager, all the civil officials have arrived from a mile away. I understand. Yun-yi sighed softly and looked at Yi Chen slowly. I'll never forget what happened tonight for the rest of my life. I will remember Mr. Ye's great kindness in my heart. I will deal with it after returning to the palace. She put on her veil again after saying that. She took a deep breath in and got up to bow to Yi Chen in all seriousness. Then, he turned around slowly. Tears flowed uncontrollably. Outside the carriage, hundreds of civil officials wearing official robes and holding ceremonial tablets knelt on the ground. Your subjects greet the Empress Dowager. Long live the Empress Dowager! Yun-yi's temperament was cold and indifferent. She once again regained her noble and proud expression. She raised her white hand and said, "Everyone, please rise." After the ministers stood up, a man in purple armor took a few steps forward and knelt on one knee. This lowly one is late and has frightened the Empress Dowager. I deserve the death penalty. The commander of the Imperial Guards, Ma Yuanxuan, was a martial ancestor. He had worked hard to protect the capital for generations. General Ma, it's your duty to protect the capital. I can't leave you. What's the crime? Please rise. Yun-yi said indifferently. Ma Yuanxuan stood up and looked around. He hesitated and said, Empress Dowager, I heard that you were intercepted by the rebel army 500 kilometers away. There were as many as 100,000 of them. The moment that was said, the entire place was in an uproar. Disbelief appeared on the faces of many civil officials and the soldiers who came to welcome them. 100,000 rebel soldiers. With such power they could even take down a dangerous pass. Under everyone's gaze, Yun-yi said slowly, there are indeed as many as 100,000 rebels. However, I was lucky enough to meet an extraordinary person. Under this person's escort, I defeated the tens of thousands of soldiers, killed the rebels, and arrived at the capital safely. What? There's actually such a powerful person in this world? Ma Yuanxuan was shocked. His expression changed as he said, May I ask if this person is here, Empress Dowager? The civil officials around them were also discussing. Yun-yi turned around slowly and looked at the carriage behind her. She said softly, Mr. Yi. A few seconds later, Yi Chen walked out of the carriage with his daughter in his arms. He lifted his eyes and looked at the people around him. Sir, you've done well in escorting the Empress Dowager. Please accept my bow. Ma Yuanxuan bowed to Yi Chen solemnly and said sincerely, May I know your name and where are you from, sir? Although he said that, there was a hint of doubt in his eyes. After all, Yi Chen was too young. My name is Mad Southern Yi, Yi Chen said calmly. He had already thought about it. Since he wanted to find Su Yuhan and his parents, why not let his name spread everywhere before he knew where they were? Whether it was Su Yuhan, his parents, Wu Shuang, or the patriarch, they were extremely familiar with the name Mad Southern Yi. So it's Mr. Yi. Ma Yuanxuan cupped his fists and said, "Please get on my warhorse. We'll talk about everything after we enter the city." Not long after, the news of the Empress Dowager's return to the capital spread throughout the world. Along the way, Yi Chen had killed 5 supreme martial masters consecutively and defeated thousands of troops on his own. It was like a huge torrent that swept through the entire northern region. Mad Southern Ye's name shook the northern region. Have you guys heard? The Empress Dowager was attacked on her way back to the capital. Tisk, isn't the Empress Dowager in the palace? Why is she outside the capital? Who knows? However, I heard that the Empress Dowager's journey back to the capital was extremely dangerous. She was first chased by the 5 martial masters, then she was surrounded by 100,000 rebel troops. What happened after that? It was said that a man called Mad Southern Yi killed everyone in an invincible manner. He defeated 100,000 troops on his own and brought the Empress Dowager back to the capital safely. Such a scene had practically appeared on every street, including the major empires. Countless commoners were boasting about it. Moreover, this story was still being adapted and exaggerated by the storytellers in the various restaurants and brothels, spreading it far and wide. At the border of the major dynasties, at Tiger Xiong Pass, the hundreds of thousands of troops from the 2 countries were still facing each other. However, both sides were focused on the 2 men who were playing a game in the sky. At this moment, the chess game was like a dragon and a tiger fighting. The white was the tiger and the black was the dragon. Slap! The military advisor of the Qing dynasty, Gu Jianqiu, placed a white piece and broke the black piece's dragon tail. Then, he smiled faintly. "Brother Qi, you've lost." "Not necessarily." The old man in the Taoist robe seemed to have aged even more. However, he shook his head and smiled. With a trembling hand, he placed a piece on the dragon's head. Immediately, everything changed, and the chess game changed drastically. "You actually hid this move." Gu Jianqiu's expression darkened slightly. Then, he sneered and said, "Even though you won this game, your sect has lost." End of this chapter. Chapter 1084. Not necessarily. The old man still shook his head. At that moment, a huge crane suddenly flew over from the sky, heading straight for Gu Jianqiu. Gu Jianqiu waved his sleeve, and the crane suddenly turned into a scroll and landed in his hand. Blurred. After reading the information, Gu Jianqiu immediately spat a mouthful of blood. His eyes were filled with shock. How is this possible? 5 supreme martial masters were killed. The 100,000-strong army was defeated. Mad Southern Yi. What a Mad Southern Yi! The latter's face twitched a few times before he looked at the old man in the Taoist robe. "Brother Qi, is this your hidden chess piece? How can I treat such an existence as a chess piece?" The old man in the Taoist robe smiled. "I'm just following the orders of the forces and the heavens." After saying that, he looked at Gu Jianqiu with a faint smile. "Are we still playing chess?" "Retreat." Gu Jianqiu's expression changed. He gave the order and left unwillingly. Daizhou was tens of thousands of kilometers away from Longjing. Useless, a bunch of useless people. That's 100,000 people. Even if 100,000 pigs stand still and let them kill them, it'll take them a month, right? A man in a dragon robe was smashing things in the house with a ferocious expression. Countless people knelt in front of him, not daring to move at all. After the commotion subsided, an old man stepped forward and said in a trembling voice, "The Empress Dowager has returned to the palace, and the news of us intercepting and killing has been spread. Now, the people are angry everywhere." The moment that was said, the man in the dragon robe immediately sneered, send a message to the others. We'll attack tonight. Yes. Everyone was shocked. The man in the dragon robe turned around and looked at the sky. Coldness surged in his eyes. I want the world to fall into chaos because of me. Night fell. The capital of the great dynasty, Longjing. In a luxurious mansion in the east of the city, Yi Chen set up a barrier and began to count his consumption and gains from Langya County after sending everyone away. Ever since he returned to the capital with Yun Yi and the rest, Yun Yi had asked the young emperor to give him a mansion. This mansion covered an area of nearly 1,000 mu. It was the mansion of the former Minister of Revenue. However, the former Minister of Revenue was arrested for corruption, and the mansion had been empty until now. As the story of his trip spread, he became the topic of discussion for everyone in the great dynasties. As a result, in just half a day, the outside of the mansion was filled with people. Countless people handed over their name cards to see him. Among them, there was no lack of high-ranking officials, nobles, or righteous men of the Jianghu. There were even people who wanted to challenge him. However, the commotion only subsided after Yi Chen kicked an intruder out. This time, I obtained 500 spirit stones, and all of them are low-grade spirit stones. There are also countless exotic flowers and herbs, but their grades aren't high. Yi Chen secretly calculated the income of his trip. He did not expect that there would be a day when he would be so poor. Fortunately, Yun Yi has already returned to the palace. I believe that she will deliver what I want soon. He put all the things back, smiled in satisfaction, and was about to go into the house to see his daughter. The little girl had eaten a lot of low-grade medicinal pills recently. Perhaps it was because of the large amount that she was prone to drowsiness. Right at this moment, he suddenly stopped in his tracks and looked up at the courtyard. He said, "Since you're here, show yourself." At the next moment, a figure suddenly appeared in the courtyard. It was an old man in a purple Taoist robe. His figure was slightly hunched. A quasi-saint? Yi Chen's eyes flashed. He could sense the aura of a quasi-saint from the other party's body. This was also the first quasi-saint he had seen in the ancient desolate realm. When the old man was less than 10 steps away from him, he suddenly stopped and cupped his fists. State Preceptor of the Great Dynasties, Qi Tiandao, greets fellow Yi. You're the State Preceptor of the Great Dynasties? Yi Chen's eyes focused and he said calmly, "Why are you looking for me so late at night?" "Fellow Yi, I've been waiting for you for a long time." A strange gleam flashed through the old man's eyes as he looked at Yi Chen. "Why are you waiting for me?" Yi Chen frowned. There was a hint of hostility in his eyes. He had never met the other party before, let alone had any friendship with him. "I know you have many questions. Let me explain later." As if sensing his wariness, the old man smiled faintly. Then, he waved his sleeve and a storage bag landed in Yi Chen's hand. "Fellow Yi, there are 10,000 spirit stones in the bag. It's the surplus of the great dynasties for a year." Yi Chen reached out and took it. He probed it with his divine consciousness and found that there were exactly 10,000 spirit stones. The spiritual energy was much more abundant than the ones he had obtained before. "This is the first big gift from this old man to you." After seeing him accept it, the old man seemed to be relieved. Then, he flicked his finger and a golden token shot at Yi Chen. "Fellow Yi, this is my second gift to you. This is the wormhole teleportation token that connects the great dynasties to the other 4 hells," the old man said slowly. Yi Chen accepted it and looked at the former. "Fellow, you're here on the orders of the Empress Dowager, right?" Whether it was the spirit stones or the wormhole teleportation token, they were all promises that Yun Yi had made to Yi Chen earlier. Although he knew that the other party would not go back on his word, he did not expect it to be so efficient. "I still have a third gift to give you." The old man did not answer the question and said, "The Empress Dowager once said that you came out this time to look for your wife." "That's right," Yi Chen said. The old man said, "Do you have the 8 characters of birth?" Yi Chen frowned. As if sensing his displeasure, the old man said, "To tell you the truth, I know some divination. Perhaps I can help you find the whereabouts of your wife." Yi Chen's gaze at him finally changed. "The reason why you're so drained is because you've suffered a backlash from forcefully comprehending the heavenly secrets, right?" He had only recovered his golden core true essence. If he was at a close distance, he could completely deduce Su Yuhan's whereabouts. However, on the way here, he had secretly deduced it, but he could not deduce it at all. This meant that Su Yuhan was too far away from him. Moreover, the art of deduction also involved familiarity with the space he was in, such as the location of the 8 trigrams. "Fellow, you have a sharp eye." The old man smiled faintly. "My master is a master of metaphysics. I've studied this all my life. I dare say that I'm number 1 in the entire northern region." After hesitating for a while, Yi Chen eventually wrote Su Yuhan's 8 characters of birth in the air with his bare hands and handed it to him. After the old man took it, the piece of paper shattered and turned into countless light spots that rose into the sky. If one looked closely, they would realize that the light spots were actually glowing word. At the next moment, the old man stretched his hand and collected all the words in his palm. Then, he bit his middle finger and formed strange marks on his palm. "Open my left eye to see yin and yang. Open my right eye to see the world. The 36 heavenly spirits above, the 72 earthly fiends below. Keep me alive, ghost path." He took a deep breath in and performed hand seals with both hands. P.S. Chapter 4 has been updated for today. End of this chapter. Chapter 1085. The night was dark, and in the quiet courtyard, Yi Chen's expression remained the same. He watched quietly as the Grand Preceptor, Qi Tiandao, cast a spell to deduce Su Yuhan's whereabouts. As the latter formed a hand seal with both hands, 2 balls of fire appeared in his eyes. The fire was blazing and seemed to be about to burst out. At that moment, the vitality in the latter's body faded at a speed visible to the naked eye. More and more wrinkles appeared on his face, as if they were being absorbed by the flames in his eyes. Yi Chen's expression changed slightly. He did not expect the other party to be willing to burn his vitality for him. Just as he was about to stop him, he heard the latter say, "Fellow Yi, you don't have to worry about me. I don't have much time left, and I can die without regrets if I can help you with my broken body." With that, Qi Tiandao slowly closed his eyes. This spell was called the Reincarnation Dream Technique. It was a technique passed down by his master. Cultivators could only use it twice in their lives, and each time they used it, it would consume a lot of vitality and lifespan. The first time was after the death of the late emperor of the Grand Dynasty. He had used it to find a way out for the dynasty. Yi Chen's appearance had proven his divinity. The second time he used it was to help Yi Chen find Su Yuhan. As the vitality in his body dissipated, Qi Tiandao's consciousness was extremely clear. His mind was empty. Vaguely, he seemed to have seen the world through the chaos, the entire northern region, and even the other realms, such as the eastern wilderness, the southern region, the western desert, and the central state. However, to his disappointment, he could not find it. He could not find the person who deduced it at all. His body was trembling. His mind was aching. It was a sign that he had reached his limit. He roared furiously and forcefully held on to his consciousness, trying his best to find that person again. Suddenly, an eye appeared in his line of sight. The eye was originally closed, as if a person was asleep. However, at that moment, the eye suddenly opened and met his gaze. Just that one glance. Qi Tiandao's heart trembled violently. Blurred. He spat a mouthful of blood and staggered to the ground. His face was filled with shock. "Eye, forbidden eye." Yi Chen took a step forward immediately and patted his shoulder. He channeled some spiritual energy into his body and said, "How is it? I saw an eye." Qi Tiandao took a deep breath and said in shock, It's that eye that hid the secrets of heaven, it's it that blinded everything. Yi Chen squinted. That eye is too terrifying. It only glanced at me once, and I was almost scared out of my wits. Don't talk. Take this medicinal pill. Yi Chen flicked his finger, and a Qi Jing pill landed in his hand immediately. After Qi Tiandao swallowed it, he recovered a trace of vitality. Then, he looked at Yi Chen. Fellow Yi, listen to my advice and give up. Why? Yi Chen asked. Qi Tiandao said with lingering fear, I saw a great omen from it. I saw blood flowing like a river. If you continue to search, you will only harm yourself. Yi Chen remained expressionless. What's the shape of that eye? It's like a ghost's eye floating between heaven and earth, empty and emotionless. Qi Tiandao tried his best to recall. Yi Chen's eyes turned cold when he heard that. He secretly scoffed. Seems like someone used a great divinity to hide Yuhan's whereabouts. Thinking to this point, the killing intent in his heart that he had finally calmed down surged again. I don't care who you are. As long as you dare to touch my woman, I'll destroy you even if I have to go to heaven or hell. After saying that, he suppressed his killing intent and looked at Qi Tiandao. You've paid such a huge price for me. Do you have anything in mind? The latter coughed violently a few times before saying, I don't have anything in mind, but I want to find a pillar for the future of my sect. At this point, he sighed, I've protected the sect for 1,000 years. Before I die, the last thing I want to see is the sect destroyed after I leave. So, you're saying you want me to protect the dynasty? Yi Chen frowned and shook his head. If that's really the case, I can't do it. Why? Qi Tiandao smiled bitterly. I won't stay in the dynasty. Yi Chen said calmly. You know that I'm here to look for my wife. I'll leave once I find her. As soon as he said that, Qi Tiandao fell silent. After a while, he said, Fellow Yi, can you protect my dynasty for a year? As long as the time is up, the new emperor will become an adult. By then, he will have the ability to face things independently. He looked at Yi Chen pleadingly. Within a year, the sect won't restrict your freedom. You just need to be able to help at the most critical moment. A year? Yi Chen seemed to be hesitating. Upon seeing that, Qi Tiandao said again, Don't worry. Within a year, the dynasty will share half of the spirit stones with you. You'll be on equal footing with the new emperor. You can even use the power of the entire imperial court. 3 months. Yi Chen took a deep breath in and said calmly, I can only protect your dynasty for 3 months at most. During this period, I'll wish your sect the best. Fine, 3 months it is. Qi Tiandao sighed softly. Then, he stood up and bowed to Yi Chen solemnly. I'll be troubling you for the next 3 months, fellow Yi. Your life force has been exhausted, and your time has come. Yi Chen looked at him quietly. It seems like you've consumed the medicine in the life origin pill. I'm afraid you have less than half a month left to live. Previously, when he probed the other party's body with his spiritual power, he had a good understanding of the other party's condition. The essence longevity pill could only be used 3 times in a person's life. After that, it would no longer have any effect. The former had obviously done it more than 3 times. Half a month is enough, Qi Tiandao smiled calmly. With your promise, even if I die now, I won't have any regret. His eyes were filled with relief. He had protected the sect for 1,000 years. In the past 1,000 years, he had never married a woman and had never left behind a child. Even this disciple of his, Shuang, was only recently accepted. It could be said that before this, what he could not let go of the most was the sect. Now that Yi Chen had appeared, he saw hope for the sect's future. It could be considered as an explanation to the past emperors. At that moment, there was a commotion outside the residence where Yi Chen was. It seemed like someone was shouting. The two of them appeared on the huge street in a flash. They saw a horse galloping on the street. However, the horse's mouth was foaming. It was obvious that it was exhausted. Countless commoners gathered around. On the horse, a man lay weakly on the horse's back. His lips moved slightly as if he was trying to say something. Plop, the horse fell to the ground, panting heavily as it flung the man off its back. Chi Tiandao waved his sleeve and helped the man up. Then, he asked, "What happened?" Grand Preceptor. The man said intermittently, "Rebellion, the 8 kings have rebelled. The 5 states and 13 counties have gathered 1,000,000 troops. They split into 5 groups and broke through 10 passes in a row, attacking the capital." End of this chapter. Chapter 1086. It was night time. The capital of a major dynasty, Longjing City. While most people were still in dreamland, an earth-shattering piece of news exploded in the capital like a heavy bomb. The 8 kings led by the acting king had rebelled. The acting king had rebelled in Daizhou. The ghost king had rebelled in Yuzhou. The Chu king had rebelled in Chuzhou. The Liang king had rebelled in Liang province. The Yong king had rebelled in Yongzhou. The king of Han, King Yi, King Lu, and the rest of the 8 kings had gathered millions of troops and threatened 5 states and 13 counties to rebel. The 1,000,000-strong army marched north and broke through 10 passes in just 4 hours. They were less than 1,000 miles away from Yendang Pass. Yendang Pass was known as the last barrier of a major dynasty. Once Yendang Pass was breached, the 1,000,000-strong army would be able to march straight to Longjing City and attack the city. The news was like a thunderclap that swept through the entire dragon capital, completely waking everyone up from their dreams. That night, countless people were in a panic. In the palace of a major dynasty. Even though it was late at night, it was still brightly lit and the hall was crowded with people. What should we do? Are we going to forget about the major dynasty? Countless disheveled officials gathered in the hall. They didn't bother to tidy up their appearance and whispered to each other, their faces full of shock. The Empress Dowager has arrived with His Majesty. In such a chaotic situation, an old eunuch's voice rang out like a duck. The hall immediately quieted down. Everyone bowed subconsciously and turned to greet the outside of the hall. There, Yun-Yi, dressed in a phoenix coronet, walked quickly with a young man in a dragon robe. "Greetings, His Majesty, Empress Dowager." Everyone hurriedly kowtowed and saluted. "You may rise." Yun-Yi raised her hand slightly. Her expression was very calm and no one could tell that she was nervous at all. After all the officials stood up, a civil official stood up and said, "Empress Dowager, His Majesty, the 8 kings have rebelled and there is an emergency from afar. Now that we are helpless, we hope that you can quickly make a judgment." As soon as these words came out, the originally quiet court became noisy again. Some shook their heads, some sighed. Silence. Yun-Yi's eyes were dignified as he looked around. Even so, he could not suppress the panicked officials. At this moment, a cold voice rang out from outside the hall, "The imperial tutor has arrived." The hall immediately quietened down. Then, Chi Tiandao, who was dressed in a Taoist robe, slowly walked into the hall with the help of someone. "Your Majesty, Empress Dowager." Chi Tiandao did not care about his old body. After bowing, he sat down on the seat that had been arranged for him. Yun-Yi could not suppress the anxiety in his heart and said, "Imperial Advisor, what is the specific situation of the 8 Kings' rebellion?" How could she not know about the rebellion of the 8 kings? But what she didn't expect was that the 8 kings would rebel so quickly, almost not giving her any time to prepare. "Empress Dowager." The state preceptor stood up and said, "The 8 princes have raised their troops in 5 states and 13 counties at 3/4 of the night. The 8 princes have jointly issued an order to demand an apology from the Empress Dowager. It's a voluminous few thousand words, and they claim that after the late emperor passed away, it was the Empress Dowager who took control of the court and deceived the emperor. Therefore, they want to enter the capital to rescue the emperor." As soon as he finished speaking, the hall was in an uproar again. Yun-Yi, who was sitting on the throne, had a slight change in expression. In order to find a legitimate reason for their rebellion, The 8 princes had slandered her and even wanted to suppress her? Qi Tiandao coughed heavily. After everyone had quieted down, he said, "Now, the rebels have broken through 10 passes. They are less than 1,000 miles away from Yendang Pass." "How is that possible?" An official was shocked and said in disbelief, "Even Chuzhou, which is the nearest city, is thousands of miles away from Longjing City. How could they break through 10 passes in less than 6 hours?" "That's right," another official exclaimed in shock. "You should know that the imperial court has already set up inspection envoys all over the country. How can these traitors be so efficient?" Yes. Even if they grow wings, they can't cross thousands of miles in 4 hours, can they?" The others nodded. In the face of everyone's doubts, Qi Tiandao smiled coldly and said, "First, the inspector of Chuzhou, Lu Gaoyuan, was killed. His body was hung on the city wall. The inspector of Liang province was betrayed by his confidant. He was beheaded in public, and his entire family was killed. When the inspector of Yongzhou, Hong Qingxi, received the news, he led his confidant to try to kill the rebels. In the end, they were trampled to death by the rebels." Pingyang County, as he spoke, waves of shock rose in everyone's hearts. In just one night, many inspectors sent by the court had been killed. This could only mean that the 8 princes had planned this for a long time. That was why they were so ruthless. Sadly, many of them had never noticed it. Qi Tiandao took in everyone's expressions and said, "The 8 princes split into 5 groups and headed north. Along the way, 7 passes surrendered at the first sign of trouble. The remaining 3 passes had their guards fight to the death until the last man. At the same time, the northern barbarians mobilized all 200,000 soldiers and cooperated with the 8 princes to cross the Longyuan River and plunder the cities of the major sects. Just 15 minutes ago, the enemy Qing Kingdom military advisor Gu Jianqiu split 500,000 soldiers into 3 groups and attacked the borders of the major sects. With each sentence he spoke, everyone's faces grew paler. In the end, the hall was filled with a thick sense of hopelessness. Just the 8 princes' million soldiers attacking cities and seizing strongholds was already terrifying enough. Now there were 200,000 soldiers from the northern barbarians and 500,000 soldiers from the enemy country. The 3 added up to an army of 1.7 million. The imperial court of the major sects only had 800,000 registered soldiers at most. 800,000 against 1.7 million. With a power difference of 2 times, how could they fight? The entire hall was deathly silent. "What? Are you afraid?" Looking at the silent hall, a cold smile and sorrow flashed through the depths of Qi Tiandao's eyes. Other than using their mouths to fight for each other's interests and attacking each other, what else could these civil officials do when there was a war? If they were actually allowed to go on to the battlefield, they would probably change sides at any moment. Their so-called integrity and loyalty were nothing more than bullshit. "Empress Dowager, why don't we move the capital?" an official said hesitantly. Everyone else nodded. "That's right. Once Yendang Pass is breached, Longjing City will be finished. Let's move the capital earlier." Yun Yi looked at the scene with a sorrowful expression. "Bastard! Longjing is the foundation of our dynasty. How can we move the capital so easily? Moreover, the rebel army is still 2,000 miles away from us." A roar came from the crowd. Grand Chancellor Gu, who was only in his 90s, walked forward shakily. "Grand Advisor, Empress Dowager, Your Majesty, I beg the court to issue an imperial edict. Gather all the people in the city and fight the rebel army to the death. Longjing still has 300,000 men who can fight." Yunyi was moved. He looked at Qi Tiandao instinctively. Grand Advisor, however, Qi Tiandao shook his head slightly. "This is not appropriate. Even if we gather 300,000 new soldiers, including the veterans, there are only 500,000. How can we fight against 1 million soldiers?" "Grand Advisor, don't tell me you have a better idea?" Grand Chancellor Gu sneered. Qi Tiandao smiled. I'm willing to be the Empress Dowager and recommend someone for your majesty. With this person, we can fight against 1,000,000 soldiers. Then, he turned around abruptly and bowed solemnly toward the outside of the hall. Fellow Yi, P.S. I have something to do today, so I can only write 2 chapters. Thank you for your understanding. End of this chapter. Chapter 1087. I'm willing to be the Empress Dowager and recommend someone for His Majesty. With this person here, he can stop 1,000,000 soldiers. After Qi Tiandao finished speaking, the imperial court was silent. Everyone's faces were filled with disbelief. They even thought that they had heard wrongly, or had the Grand Preceptor gone mad. One person could stop 1,000,000 soldiers? Was he a god? Almost at that moment, all the officials in the hall, including the palace maids and eunuchs, turned to look outside the hall. There, a white-haired young man walked over slowly. The white-haired young man was holding a little girl around 5 or 6 years old. However, compared to the young man's calmness, the little girl was much more reserved. Her little hand held the young man's hand tightly, and with every step she took, she would look up at the hall timidly. The moment he saw the little girl, the eyes of the originally listless little emperor on the dragon throne lit up. Fellow Yi, Qi Tiandao bowed slightly. Yi Chen nodded lightly and lifted his eyes to look around. He saw many people looking at him with different expressions. Some of them were doubtful, some were disdainful, and most of them were suspicious. The quiet crowd also started to stir, as if they were discussing him. When his gaze landed on Yun-Yi, who was sitting on the dragon throne, the latter's gaze met his. A few seconds later, the latter lowered her head in a panic. Impudent! At this moment, a shout suddenly came from the imperial court. It's fine if you don't kneel in the imperial court, but how dare you look directly at His Majesty and the Empress Dowager? The moment that was said, Qi Tiandao and Yun-Yi frowned at the same time. They looked in the direction of the voice with gloomy expressions. An old man in the Ministry of Rites uniform stood out openly. He looked at Yi Chen coldly with an official's position. The Minister of Rites, Guo Yu. Minister Guo. Yun-Yi looked unhappy. Yi Chen was her savior. Why did she have to bow to him? Just when she was about to shout at him, she saw Yi Chen raise his hand. The latter looked straight at Guo Yu. Are you talking to me? Of course I'm talking about you. Guo Yu scoffed coldly, his words sharp. This is the imperial court of our great dynasty, not a vegetable garden. How can you be so rude? The moment that was said, the rest of the ministers nodded. They then looked at Yi Chen mockingly. Qi Tiandao said that this person could stop 1,000,000 soldiers? In their opinion, it was pure fantasy. Since that was the case, why not test him? Seeing that everyone was approving of his actions, Guo Yu became more and more powerful. He suddenly shouted, "Men, beat him out of here!" As his voice fell, killing intent flashed in Yun-Yi and Qi Tiandao's eyes. The next moment, the palace guards who were guarding outside stepped in as if they were going to take Yi Chen out. Wait. At that moment, Yun-Yi suddenly spoke from the dragon throne. Empress Dowager. Guo Yu was about to speak. However, Yun-Yi coldly said, Minister Guo, do you know your crime? Guo Yu was stunned. Yun-Yi coldly said, Mr. Yi is Aijia's savior, and secondly, he is not a citizen of my great dynasty. What obligation does he have to report to Aijia and His Majesty? Yes, Mother is right. The little emperor was clapping, but he had his eyes on Meng Meng, who was next to Yi Chen. His eyes were filled with intimacy. However, the little girl made a face at him. Empress Dowager, but... Guo Yu hesitated. Treating Aijia's savior like this is equivalent to looking down on me. Yun-Yi was extremely dignified. Mr. Yi is also the Grand Master's guest. Being rude to him is equivalent to looking down on the Grand Master. At this point, she frowned and shouted, Men, take Minister Guo down. Strip him of all his official positions and imprison him in the Supreme Court. As soon as that was said, Guo Yu almost fainted, "Spare me, Empress Dowager, spare me, Grand Master. I didn't mean to offend you." He had underestimated Yi Chen's influence and how much Yun Yi and Qi Tiandao valued Yi Chen. However, no matter how much he cried, Yun Yi and Qi Tiandao turned a blind eye to him. Then, the court guards outside took off his official robe on the spot and forcefully took him away. After that, the imperial court fell silent. No one dared to speak anymore. However, they looked at Yi Chen with fear in their eyes. The Empress Dowager was no longer as weak as before. She suddenly became extremely powerful, causing them to be unable to react for a moment. Someone subconsciously wanted to stand up and plead for Guiyu, but he was stopped by his colleagues who were close to him. Only then did he suddenly come to a realization. Regarding the Empress Dowager's decision, the Grand Master had acquiesced from the beginning to the end. Whoever stood up to object would be making an enemy of the Grand Master, and the outcome could be imagined. Since the founding of the major dynasties, the Grand Master's status was supreme. Even the Emperor had to be courteous to him, let alone the ministers. Thinking to this point, he could not help but break out in cold sweat. "Someone, give Mr. Yi a seat." Yun Yi waved her hand lightly. "Give him the 8 glazed golden throne." As her voice fell, the imperial court was in an uproar. The major dynasties respected glaze, and the quality of the glaze represented one's status. Even the Grand Master only had the 9 glazed golden throne. Meanwhile, the Empress Dowager gave Yi Chen the 8 glazed golden throne. What did that mean? Not long after, several people respectfully carried a golden glazed throne into the hall. Yi Chen sat down calmly. This caused countless people to be extremely envious. Qi Tiandao suddenly knelt down heavily to Yun Yi and said slowly, "Empress Dowager, Your Majesty, I request for Mr. Yi to be conferred the title of King, General of the South." As soon as he said that, whoosh, the imperial court was in an uproar. Everyone was astounded by this revelation. King of the South, General of the South. Such a title had never been conferred in the major dynasties. It could be said to be shocking. Even Yi Chen was shocked. Yun Yi nodded lightly. Just when she was about to agree, a voice of objection came from the imperial court. "I don't agree." But Prime Minister Guifu stood up on the spot. "Your Majesty, Empress Dowager." Guifu knelt down heavily. "Even though Mr. Yi has done a favor for our sect, we can't accept such a title. Etiquette can't be abolished, and this precedent can't be set. We beg the Empress Dowager to take back the decree." In an instant, countless ministers knelt down. Yun Yi's expression changed. Qi Tiandao's gaze was dignified. "Why? Are you guys trying to force me to abdicate?" "Imperial tutor, it's not that we want to force you to abdicate." Guifu lifted his head with a determined look on his face. "Mr. Yi isn't a member of our Dazhong dynasty. Once he's in power, as long as he has a selfish motive, he can cause our Dazhong dynasty to fall into eternal damnation." "That's right. Most importantly, this person's identity is unknown, and his background is unknown. What if he's a spy sent by the enemy kingdom?" Someone echoed. Qi Tiandao's expression was grim. Just when he was about to speak, Yi Chen, who had been silent, said, "Since you guys don't believe me, I don't have the obligation to interfere with your dynasty's matters. Lastly, don't come and beg me anymore." After saying that, he carried his daughter and left. End of this chapter. Chapter 1088. Everyone was so shocked by his reaction that they could not react for a moment. "Fellow Yi." Qi Tiandao hurriedly chased after him. Court dismissed. Yuni looked at everyone coldly and left with a flick of his sleeve. As the few of them left, the officials of the imperial court looked at each other and could not help but look at each other. An official said weakly, "Sirs, we've discussed for a long time, but it seems like we haven't come up with an effective plan to retreat. What can we do? Why don't we invite that Mr. Yi back?" A rank 5 official could not help but say, "At the moment of life and death, our dynasty is surrounded in many places. Now we can only try everything we can. What a joke. At this moment, Prime Minister Gui Fu sneered and said, "Looks like the Grand Preceptor is really old. He actually placed the hopes of our dynasty on an outsider." At this point, he said nonchalantly, "I don't believe that our dynasty is really at a dead end. Moreover, there's still no news of Yendang Pass's fall. We still have hope, the Prime Minister is right. Yendang Pass is guarded by General Han. In addition, it's easy to defend and difficult to attack. How can the rebels break through? That's right. Before that brat left, he actually told us not to beg him. What a joke. We are high-ranking officials of the imperial court. Why would we beg a commoner? Even if I die, I won't beg a brat." The rest of the ministers chimed in incessantly. Outside the palace, Qi Tiandao caught up to Yi Chen quickly and sighed softly. "They're all civil officials. Apart from being able to talk, they're useless. Why do you care about them?" Yi Chen suddenly stopped and turned to look at him. "You're wrong. I'm not arguing with them. I shouldn't have meddled in other people's business." With that, he left resolutely. Seeing that he had made up his mind, Qi Tiandao could only smile bitterly. His figure then disappeared into the hazy night. That night, several military orders were issued from the capital. The resulting chain reaction was that countless armies headed south, speeding towards Wild Goose Pass. Obviously, they wanted to reinforce this final barrier. Secondly, Imperial advisor Qi Tiandao personally led 200,000 soldiers to the border to resist the attack of 500,000 soldiers from the enemy Qin kingdom. Longjing City began to be heavily guarded. People were only allowed to leave, but not to enter. The Royal Guards, and the City Defense Army all left the city, setting up 3 lines of defense between Yendang Pass and Longjing City. At the same time, the Ministry of War began to mobilize the common people overnight to recruit soldiers and horses. The person in charge was the current Prime Minister, Gui Fu. In less than 2 hours, he had successfully gathered an army of 350,000 soldiers. One of the ministers complimented, as expected of the Prime Minister, such efficiency can be said to be godly. Gui Fu stroked his beard and laughed. "This time, I have raised 300,000 soldiers. I have already submitted a petition to Empress Dowager to allow my son Gu Yu to lead them south. With young Master Gu leading the team personally, we will definitely be victorious. We will defeat the enemy and help our sect escape." The Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Revenue was full of flattery. "We will congratulate the Prime Minister in advance. Once the rebels retreat, the Prime Minister's name will definitely shake the major sections. Your prestige might even surpass the Imperial advisor." "Yes, yes, yes," the others nodded in agreement. Gui Fu pretended to be humble. "It's all for the great sect." In the Empress Dowager's bedroom, Yun-Yi looked at herself in the mirror in a daze. Her body was a little stiff. "Mr. Yi is gone?" An old eunuch bowed and said, "Empress Dowager, the people I sent to investigate reported that the mansion was already empty. It seems that Mr. Yi really left." Yun-Yi's eyes dimmed. She suddenly felt a sense of bitterness in her heart. She then took a deep breath and said, "Forget it. I was too selfish. After all, Mr. Yi is not a member of our sect. It's just that I don't know when I will see Mr. Yi again, or maybe we will never see each other again in this life." At such a time, she did not dare to think about it, and she could not think about it. Less than 1,000 miles away from Longjing, in an extremely hidden kernel. The terrain was relatively low, and it was a natural cave that extended nearly 100 feet deep into the ground. If an ordinary person fell in, they would definitely be smashed into pieces. At that moment 2 figures, one big and one small, appeared near the cave. They did not move in the face of the huge suction coming from the cave. "It's here." Yichun carried his daughter and looked at the cave before him quietly. Qi Tiandao once said that the great dynasty's wormhole is here. It seems like he didn't lie to me. Now that I have the great dynasty's teleportation token, I can teleport to the other 5 territories. His eyes flickered. However, I still don't know where Yuhan and my parents are. Where should I go? Eastern wilderness? Southern region? Western desert? Or Middle State and Tianfeng Sea area? The Qingmu Fort in the Tianfeng Sea area can be considered to be related to me. Perhaps I can use their power to find Yuhan and the rest, Yi Chen thought to himself. The little girl was in his embrace. She looked down from her neck and said in fear of heights, "Daddy, are we jumping down from here? If you're afraid, close your eyes. Open them when Daddy calls for you." Yi Chen kissed her lovingly. His wife was not here, his parents were not here, and his brothers and friends were not here either. Fortunately, his daughter was with him. At that moment, his ears trembled a few times, and he suddenly looked into the distance. Over there were several auras rushing towards them. 4 of them had actually reached the martial arts grandmaster level. Yi Chen's eyes flickered a few times. Subsequently, he gestured to his daughter to keep quiet and gradually hid in the void. Whoosh whoosh, a moment later, 4 figures landed near the cave. They were 4 men, and the leader was a Taoist with a plump figure. The fat Taoist lowered his head and sized up the cave for a few seconds before saying, "Fellow Wu, are you sure that the wormhole below is where the royal family of the major sects are hiding?" A freckled old man behind him said, "Fellow Lu, this secret was discovered by my master on behalf of the king. It's absolutely true. How can it be wrong? Since it was discovered by the king, then it can't be wrong." The fat Taoist nodded. "Now that the 8 kings are suppressing Yendang Pass, in order to prevent the royal family from escaping to other territories, we must destroy this wormhole." What? The moment that was said, the other 3 were shocked. Someone said, "Fellow Wu, it's extremely difficult to build such an impulsive formation. Once it's destroyed, it'll completely cut off the connection between our northern region and the other regions." "I can't care so much." The fat Taoist's words flickered. "I heard that a few days ago, a demon suddenly appeared in the southern region. This demon wreaked havoc in the entire southern region and wiped out many great sects overnight. Fellow Taoist Wu, is the demon you speak of a corpse monarch? It's said that this fellow has killed many powerhouses and even forced a martial saint to take action. Even so, it's difficult to stop him." Someone sucked in a breath of cold air. End of this chapter. Chapter 1089. "That's right, it's him." The fat priest nodded. "Therefore, in order to prevent this person from entering our northern territory, we have to destroy this wormhole no matter what." On the other hand, Yi Chen, who was hiding next to them with the invisibility tactic, was moved when he heard that. Devil? Corpse Emperor? Could it be that he had one? At that moment, a black ball of light suddenly appeared in the fat priest's hand. It was shrouded in a dense aura of death that did not dissipate. However, the moment they saw it, the expressions of the other 3 changed drastically, and their eyes were filled with fear. Could this be the upside-down ball of the northern barbarians? Someone sucked in a breath of cold air. "That's right." The fat priest smiled faintly. "It's the upside-down autumn of the northern barbarians. As long as you throw this into the wormhole, you can change the rules of space and make it collapse automatically." With that, he held the upside-down ball in one hand and looked down at the cave in front of him. He grinned sinisterly and said, "Great sects and royal families, once your path of retreat is cut off, you'll be completely trapped by the 8 kings." Right at that moment, he suddenly felt his hand lighten. The upside-down ball in his hand suddenly disappeared. At the next moment, Yi Chen's figure appeared slowly. He looked at the upside-down ball in his hand and shook his head. "Fortunately, I came in time. Otherwise, you guys would have destroyed the wormhole here." As he appeared, the expressions of the 4 of them changed slightly. They immediately stared at him, as if they were facing a great enemy. When the fat priest came back to his senses, his expression was extremely terrible. "Brat, how dare you take my thing? Let me ask you, did the devil from the southern region that you mentioned earlier claim to have one?" Yi Chen exerted strength in his arm and shattered the upside-down ball completely. "How dare you destroy my upside-down ball?" The fat priest was shocked and furious. He attacked Yi Chen with killing intent from behind. "I'll make you beg for death." Yi Chen merely glanced at him. Just a glance. The fat priest immediately felt that he could no longer move. At the same time, an extremely terrifying pressure crushed over like a tide. Plop, he immediately knelt on the ground, feeling extremely shocked. He was a martial ancestor. He could not even withstand a single glance. When the other three saw this, they were stunned at first. Then, they wanted to fly away without saying a word. "Stay here." Yi Chen waved his sleeve and pressed the three of them onto the ground directly. Subsequently, he walked toward the fat priest step by step. "Senior, I'm a man of King Chu," the fat Taoist hastily said. However, Yi Chen could not be bothered to talk to him. He pressed his hand on his head and performed the soul-searching tactic forcefully. After the time it took for an incense stick to burn, 4 fireballs shot out from Yi Chen's fingertip. 3 Wu Zongs were burned to ashes on the spot. The new demon from the southern region has indeed won. Yi Chen was between laughter and tears. Through using the soul-searching spell on the 4 of them, Yi Futian found out that Ing had actually come to the ancient barren world a day earlier than him. However, Ing had landed in the southern region. This guy seemed to be injured. As soon as he appeared, he was subdued into a corpse puppet by a powerful being. However, the other party underestimated Ying's capabilities. 2 days later, he was sucked dry by Ing. And now, he had become the public enemy of the southern region. He frowned. "It's a pity that the 4 of them don't know the whereabouts of the patriarch, Wu Shuang, and the others." Yi Chen walked to the last old man as he thought to this point. He performed the soul-searching tactic, while ignoring the old man's begging. After digesting the old man's memories, there was finally a slight change on his calm face. Yun Yi has actually seen the ghost ship from the last person's memory. He learned that the old man was from the northern barbarians. The reason why the northern barbarians were involved in the civil war of the great dynasties was all because of Yun Yi. It was because there had been traces of the ghost ship in the northern region. Only a few people knew about this. The great figure of the northern barbarians was one of them, and the other one was Yun Yi. The ghost ship. At that moment, Yi Chen became slightly excited. Didn't the last time the ghost ship appeared was when that lunatic took Yuhan and the rest away? In other words, if I know about the ghost ship, wouldn't I have a chance to know the whereabouts of Yuhan and my parents? Thinking to this point, he raised his head and looked in the direction of Longjing. Looks like the breakthrough point is Yun Yi, the great dynasty's Longjing city. The sky gradually brightened. However, at this moment, the outside of Longjing city was densely covered with a strong killing intent, but there was even more endless despair. Countless soldiers guarding the city stood on the city gate tower and looked outside the city with fear in their eyes. Among them, there was no lack of the Empress Dowager of the great dynasties, Yun Yi, and all the ministers. An army. A densely packed army. At this moment, looking out of Longjing, there were figures everywhere. The generals were like clouds, and the carriages were like dragons. The allied army of the 8 kings used less than 4 hours to break through Yendang Pass, and all the soldiers guarding the pass died in battle. The loss of Yendang Pass caused the last barrier of Longjing to be completely lost. The rebel army marched straight in, and the soldiers were at the gates. On the border, the imperial advisor led an army of 200,000 and was in a stalemate with the enemy Qing kingdom. He was on his way to provide reinforcements. "My son, you died so miserably." On the city gate tower, Prime Minister Guifu almost cried his eyes blind. It was as if he had aged dozens of years in an instant. Normally, perhaps there would be ministers who would go over to support him and comfort him. However, at this moment, everyone only felt anger toward him. The 300,000 new soldiers he had gathered were led by his eldest son, Gu Yu. However, they had been scattered by the 50,000 rebel soldiers. In the end, the 300,000 soldiers had been trapped and killed. The so-called trapped and killed was to bury them alive. Because of his blind confidence, he had buried the hopes of the great dynasties and countless families. An official roared angrily, "Stop crying. If you want to cry, wait until you reunite with your useless son in the underworld." Yuni looked at all of this with a mocking expression. From the moment the news of the defeat came to the moment the rebel army surrounded Longjing, she had not said a single word. She knew that the great dynasties were finished. Even if the imperial advisor could arrive in time, he would be powerless to turn the situation around, much less the imperial advisor. She quietly sized up everyone around her. There were those who were afraid, those who were determined, and those who were crying. However, her heart was incomparably calm. She subconsciously glanced to the south, and the scenes of Yi Chen escorting her to the north involuntarily appeared in her mind. If Mr. Yi had not left with his bravery, perhaps the great dynasties would still have a glimmer of hope. With that thought, she rejected it. No, Mr. Yi left well. He's not a member of the great dynasties, so he shouldn't stay behind to accompany us in death. She subconsciously gripped her sleeve. No one knew that there was a pair of scissors in her sleeve. That was what she had prepared for herself. The day the city was breached would be the day she committed suicide. Right at this moment, a steed suddenly galloped out from the army outside the city. The other party stopped outside the range of the city wall. Above it, a burly man in armor sneered, "Empress Dowager, my lord only has one thing to say on behalf of the king. As long as you are willing to order the city to surrender and hand over the person surnamed Yi, more killing can be prevented. Otherwise, when we attack the city, it will be the time to massacre the city." End of this chapter. Chapter 1090. Longjing City. The generals stood tall, and the flags fluttered in the wind. Otherwise, when we attack the city, it will be time to massacre the city. As the voice of the commanding officer fell, the people on the wall were dead silent at first, but then they burst into an uproar. Most of them were cries of fear. Massacre the city. The rebel army actually wanted to massacre the city. One had to know that this was the capital of a major dynasty. There were millions of people in the city. Once the city was massacred, millions of people would die. Most importantly, the Empress Dowager, Yun-Yi, and many important officials of the imperial court were present. "Traitors, you traitors will die a horrible death. Empress Dowager, don't open the city. As officials, we have long handed over our lives to the country. Yes, we would rather die than surrender." Many officials and soldiers guarding the city roared at the top of their lungs, their eyes filled with determination. "Why don't we open the city? That's right. That's a massacre. Once we anger them, all of us will die. Empress Dowager, we don't want to die." Most of them begged for mercy in fear. Some even knelt before Yun-Yi. Some even rushed down the city wall, as if they wanted to surrender. Throughout the entire process, Empress Dowager Yun-Yi supported the little emperor beside her and watched this scene expressionlessly. When she noticed the wailing ministers, there was only sorrow and mockery in her eyes. It was because most of these people were the ones who opposed Yi Chen's involvement in the matter of the dynasty. Thinking to this point, she raised her head slightly and looked at the army that covered the sky and earth. Her gaze landed on the messenger, and then she opened her red lips slightly. "I can die, but the dignity of the royal family will never fall." As soon as he said that, the messenger below the city immediately sneered, "Do you want to drag the entire city down with you?" The threat in his words was not concealed at all, but it was mixed with dense killing intent. At the same time, the army outside the city shouted in unison. The commotion was like thunder. It caused everyone's expression to change. "Wait!" Gu Ifu suddenly roared loudly, and then said to the acting king, "Acting king, princes, this lowly official is willing to surrender, this lowly official is willing to surrender." Everyone looked at him in disbelief when they heard this. One had to know. He Guifu was the prime minister of the dynasty. Previously, he had given everyone the impression that he was incomparably loyal, and many officials viewed him as a role model. However, in this time of national crisis, he actually wanted to defect to the enemy? Yun Yi's delicate body trembled slightly. A minister scolded, "Guifu, you're shameless. Don't forget that you're the prime minister, so what?" Guifu smiled coldly. "This old man has done enough for the country. Now I just want to spend my remaining years in peace." At this point, he looked extremely pained. "Moreover, my son, Guyu, has already sacrificed his life for the country. He has already done enough for the country." "Shameless! Old man, you are really shameless and hypocritical." Many people pointed at him and cursed. Guifu looked at Yun Yi and the little emperor, smiled disdainfully, and then jumped down from the city wall. Although he was a civil official, he had cultivated before. Even though he had not reached the Grandmaster realm, this small city wall was not a problem for him. Ah! At this time, there was a sudden burst of laughter from the army outside the city. "If Prime Minister Gu is willing to defect, I will welcome you." Under everyone's gaze, the army slowly parted to form a path. Then, several people walked in the air, carrying a sedan chair. As the sedan chair landed, a middle-aged man wearing a dragon robe slowly walked out from it. "It's the acting king, this traitor!" someone exclaimed. Everyone looked at the middle-aged man again, their eyes were filled with shock and hatred. It was this person who contacted the other 7 vassals and triggered this civil war in the dynasty. Guifu walked over respectfully and said with a slight flattery, "Thank you, Your Highness." "No, thank you, Your Majesty. This old official will repay you with my life." After saying that, he stood behind the acting king. The acting king looked at the city wall again, his eyes focused on Yun Yi. "Empress Dowager, now that things have come to this, why not surrender? Even if you don't think for yourself, you have to think for the countless people in this city, right?" However, Yun Yi just glanced at him. Refusing a toast only to drink a forfeit. The acting king's face turned cold and said, "I will give you another chance. As long as you are willing to surrender to me in advance, not only will I not kill you, but I will also reward you afterward." As his voice fell, there were people directly jumped down from the city wall. "Your Highness, I am willing to surrender." "And me!" In just a few breaths there were more than a dozen civil officials who jumped down from the city wall in front of everyone, defecting at the last minute. This scene infuriated everyone present. But there was more helplessness. Yun Yi raised her head, her slender hand slowly grasping the little emperor beside her, and then she smiled. "Jing-er, are you afraid of death?" "Mother, I don't want to die." The little emperor was already in a daze, shivering, his eyes full of fear. "I know you don't want to die," Yun Yi said softly. "But you are the emperor, you are the ruler of a country, you are the only descendant of the previous emperor, you are the face of the royal family. As the saying goes, the emperor guards the gate of the country, and the emperor dies for the country. You have the obligation to live and die with this city." Her voice was neither loud nor soft, but every single word was heard by everyone around her. "Empress Dowager, many loyal and upright people were moved, and those who were greedy for life and afraid of death before, looked extremely ashamed." The little emperor still shook his head. "No, I don't want to die." Yun Yi smiled faintly and gently picked up the little emperor. She then surveyed her surroundings, and within her clear and cold gaze, there was a sliver of determination. "People of the big sex, it is because of my incompetence that the world is in such a disaster today." The next moment, she carried the little emperor and directly jumped onto the city wall, then jumped down heavily, face down. Seeing this scene, everyone was shocked, obviously not expecting her to make such a choice. Even the army outside the city was dumbfounded. "Empress Dowager, no!" The commander of the Imperial Guards, Ma Yuanxuan, took a step forward, his figure swept, and directly grabbed Yun Yi's skirt in midair. Only then did the two people who were falling stop. Empress Dowager. Ma Yuanxuan grabbed the person with one hand, and the city wall with the other, and snorted. We still have hope, why do you have to do this? Save them, quick, save them! He roared at the top of his lungs. Only then did many people on the city wall come to their senses. One after another experts moved, pulling the three people up. Empress Dowager. A general knelt down heavily. Today, I am willing to live and die with this city. I hope you will not belittle yourself. End of this chapter. Chapter 1091. Thump, thump, thump. Following a series of loud noises, more than 1,000 soldiers knelt down in unison. We are willing to live and die with this city. Seeing this, a civil official also knelt down and laughed. I am willing to live and die with this city. Boom, boom, boom. In an instant, everyone on the city wall knelt down. We are willing to live and die with this city. We are willing to live and die with this city. Millions of people in the city shouted in unison. The atmosphere in the entire world was pushed to its peak, and countless commoners revealed resolute expressions. If they were previously afraid of death, after witnessing Yun Yi's actions, the fear in their hearts no longer existed. Instead, it was replaced by bravery and determination. This movement could be said to be earth-shattering, causing the faces of the soldiers outside the city to change. They were all shocked by this imposing manner. Forcibly inciting the hearts of the people? Outside the city, the acting king looked on mockingly. He then looked at Yun Yi and sneered. This woman is not simple. Unfortunately, she is only a woman. Today, not even the gods can save you all. He raised his hand slightly and an indifferent voice came from his mouth. Attack the city, leave no one alive. As soon as these words came out, someone roared, the acting king has ordered, attack the city, leave no one alive, leave no one alive. Ho ho ho, the originally silent army of hundreds of thousands of soldiers moved in unison. They all took a step forward and pushed the siege weapons to the front. There were wooden gates, siege ladders, kerosene, catapults, and so on. The number of weapons made one's scalp go numb. Empress Dowager, please step aside. The commander of the Imperial Guards, Ma Yuanxuan, roared and then turned to the soldiers. Is your blood still warm? Are you all afraid of death? Fight to the death. Fight to the death. On the city wall, the 30,000 soldiers roared in unison. They then took a step forward and unsheathed their long swords. There were no less than 300,000 rebels. Adding up all of them, there were only 30,000 of them. Even if the disparity in strength was too great, so what? At most, they would just die. Fellow citizens, those who are not afraid of death can come forward. Today we will let the rebels know that even if they die, they will pay the price. The Minister of Justice, Li Shan-yuan, laughed tragically. Count me in. A dark-skinned man carrying a child in the city responded and silently handed the child to his wife beside him. If I die, you can remarry and raise our son well. With that, he resolutely stepped onto the tower, leaving behind the crying child and his wife, who was secretly wiping away her tears. A disheveled young man knelt heavily in front of an old man. Grandpa, the country is in danger. Please forgive me for not being able to take care of you in your old age, child, go. The old man stretched out his old hand and caressed her face. He said in a trembling voice, You go ahead of me. I'll come to find you after I've collected your remains. The young man nodded and ascended the tower resolutely. An imperial guard handed him a bow and asked, Do you know how to use it? Yes. The young man took it and drew the bow into the shape of a full moon. My family is poor, so I often go hunting in the mountains. Okay, stand behind me later. The imperial guard grinned. Go after I die. If I don't die, help me collect my bones and bring them back to my family. By the way, they call him Big Blackie. What about you? My name is Ding Peng. The young man's eyes suddenly turned red. And me? If a man dies, then so be it. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. In less than 30 minutes, tens of thousands of young men stood up in the city. These people spontaneously stood behind the city gate. Due to the lack of weapons and equipment, most of them didn't have any armor or weapons to protect themselves. Some of them were holding wooden sticks, some were holding iron rakes for digging dung, and some were holding kitchen knives. Yun-yi looked at this scene with tears in her eyes. She was entrusted with a heavy responsibility by the late emperor. But from the beginning to the end, she did not have much of a sense of acceptance towards this responsibility. To be precise, she resisted it. But at this moment, she only felt that even if she died immediately, she would have no regrets. Kill! The commanders of the rebel army shouted in unison. Rumble! The tens of thousands of soldiers in the lead suddenly stepped forward, carrying a huge battering ram as they charged straight at the city gate. Siege ladders were pushed forward, catapults were launched, and shields covered the sky as they smashed directly at the city wall. At this moment, the atmosphere between heaven and earth suddenly changed. As if a mountain torrent had broken out, the fierce sound of killing covered everything. "Release the arrows!" Ma Yuanxuan shouted from atop the city wall. Among the nearly 50,000 soldiers, 10,000 archers stepped forward in unison. Ignoring the flying boulders, they knocked their arrows and drew their bowstrings. Thump, thump, someone screamed and someone fell. But every time someone fell, someone else would step forward to replace him. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. An overwhelming rain of arrows rained down from the top of the city walls, landing on the attacking army like dense raindrops. Some of the rebel army fell, and some screamed. But compared to the total number of casualties, it was no different from a stone falling into the sea, unable to cause a single ripple. The acting king sat in his carriage, expressionless as he watched the scene unfold before him, as if the withering of lives did not affect him at all. Acting king, why don't we divide the troops into 4 groups and attack from all 4 gates at the same time? A strategist suggested. They have few troops and even fewer equipment, so they will not be able to defend all 4 gates at the same time. As long as any one of the gates is breached, it will be the end of them. What's the hurry? The acting king peeled an orange and ate it. I have the advantage in numbers. If we want to fight, we must completely crush all their hopes. Only then will the other 7 fellows know how powerful I am. The other 7 kings are on their way here now. I am worried that they will pick up a ready-made. The strategist said hesitantly. Noisy. The acting king looked at him coldly. Just one look. The strategist hurriedly apologized and did not say a word. Rumble, as the earth-shattering sounds grew louder and louder, the siege battle entered a white-hot state, with people dying one after another. Thousands of soldiers defending the city died in an instant. Corpses kept falling, and people kept coming to replace them without fear of death. Yun-yi clenched her fists tightly, sobbing uncontrollably. Your Majesty, take a good look. These people died for you, for the royal family of our major sects. The little emperor covered his eyes with his hands and screamed in fear. At this moment, the attacking army was less than 10 feet away from the north gate. As long as they got close, the tall north gate would be smashed open in no time. Ma Yuanxuan roared. Archers, we must not let them get close to the city gate. Even if we all die, we must hold on. The imperial tutor is on his way back. End of this chapter. Chapter 1092. On the city wall, Ding Ping stood at the back with his bow and arrows, trembling as he looked at the corpses that fell one after another in front of him. It was too tragic. Before this, he had never witnessed a real war with his own eyes. His trip to serve his country was purely due to his hot-bloodedness. However, within the time it took for an incense stick to burn, he witnessed the tragedy of the battle with his own eyes. Someone was dying every minute and every second. The boulders rumbled, and his ears were almost deafened. It was as if the entire city was shaking. The kerosene spread to the city wall and ignited a raging fire. Some people were burned alive, and the air was filled with the smell of burning and stench. Is this a real war? Ding Peng's teeth trembled as he noticed that the dark-skinned man beside him was extremely calm, constantly wiping the crossbow in his hand. For this person, Ding Peng remembered. It was Chun Dong's blacksmith, Chun Taizhu. He was the man who handed the child in his hand to his wife, and was the first to climb the city wall. Uncle Taizhu, Ding Peng said with a trembling voice, you're not afraid? Afraid? The dark-skinned man immediately fell silent, then laughed self-deprecatingly. There's no one who isn't afraid, but in this world, fear can't solve things. Ding Peng seemed to understand. Seeing that he was really afraid, the dark-skinned man smiled and said, Little Peng, you're still a virgin, right? Ding Peng was stunned, then his face turned red. Obviously, he did not expect that the other party would still be in the mood to care about this at this time. I promise you, Taizhu, don't die. The dark-skinned man patted his shoulder. Live well, later let your grandfather find a wife for you. The taste of women is very wonderful. That big white legs, that big high, tisk. Gulp. Ding Peng could not help but swallow a mouthful of saliva. At this time, the city guard shouted, Chen Taizhu, here. The dark-skinned man almost subconsciously got up, then picked up the bow on the ground and rushed into the front line of defense. Before leaving, he turned back and said to Ding Peng, You must survive. Immediately after, Ding Peng discovered that the arrows shot by the unscrupulous Uncle Taizhu had accurately hit people. Good, the other archers cheered in unison. Chen Taizhu subconsciously looked back at the crowd in the city behind him, trying to see if his wife and children were still there. Boom, a huge rock flew from below the city and directly smashed into his body. In an instant, more than a dozen corpses were heavily smashed into the ground. Uncle Taizhu Ding Peng's eyes almost split open. The city guard shouted at the top of his lungs, Big Black Ding Peng. Ding Peng fell heavily to the ground, his body trembling more and more. The scene of the dark-skinned man's tragic death still echoed in his mind. At this moment, he felt someone pat his shoulder. He looked up and saw that the person in front of him was Big Blackie, who had spoken to him earlier. Let's go! Big Blackie was still smiling. Ding Peng suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood, the veins on his neck throbbing violently. He then picked up the bow on the ground and rushed to the front line of defense with a loud shout. Kill, kill, kill! Kill all of you! He screamed like a madman, and the arrows in his hand shot out one after another. His archery skills were even better than Chen Taizhu's, even surpassing the professional archers in the army. Every arrow he fired was sure to kill a person. Seeing this scene, the acting king outside the city frowned and then said, Bring me my bow. Not long after, he held a purple bow, then knocked an arrow and pointed it at Ding Peng on the city wall. Whoosh! Ding Peng heard the sound of air being pierced and saw a purple bow and arrow coming at him at lightning speed. Dodge! Big Blackie immediately pounced on him. Puff! Big Blackie's body fell heavily below the city wall. No. Ding Peng fell to the ground and roared. Rest in peace. Yun-Yi, who saw this scene, was frighteningly pale. If I don't die, I will treat your family well. She then looked at the little emperor hiding behind more than a dozen imperial guards, and her eyes were full of disappointment. Your Majesty, you really disappoint me. Rumble. At this moment, the entire city wall shook violently. The rebel army pushed the battering ram and approached the city gate. The huge battering ram had only been pushed once, but the entire city wall was on the verge of collapsing. On top of the countless siege ladders, there were countless rebel soldiers who were not afraid of death, trying to climb up the tower. Relying on his profound cultivation, Ma Yuanxuan ignored the overwhelming number of arrows and boulders. He stepped into the air and slashed with his saber. Countless enemies died tragically. He also went crazy. He directly landed below the city wall, and with a long saber in hand, he killed the enemy soldiers who were pushing the battering ram. His saber rose and fell, and heads rolled. Kill! Another few defending generals joined forces and landed, trying to use their strength to share the burden of the defending soldiers. You're asking for it. Seeing this, the acting king sneered and said, Order the sects to attack. Whoever disobeys, kill without mercy. Boom! Not long after, more than a dozen ancestral martial artists from the rebel army's camp flew into the air and attacked Ma Yuanxuan and the others with ferocious expressions. Screams rang out incessantly. Generals who jumped down from the city wall were killed one after another, and the battering ram once again slammed heavily against the north gate. Kill! Ma Yuanxuan was like a crazed demon, single-handedly fighting against the combined forces of 3 ancestral martial artists. You bastards deserve to die! The 3 ancestral martial artists were not only unable to do anything to him, but they were also forced to retreat. The acting king once again knocked an arrow and aimed it at Ma Yuanxuan. Whoosh! The arrow directly pierced through Ma Yuanxuan's chest, and the force of the arrow sent him flying heavily. Die! The 3 ancestral martial artists joined forces again. Ah! Ma Yuanxuan's body was almost broken, but he still laughed loudly. Traitors, you bunch of traitors, even if I die today, I will wait for you down there. Die! One of the ancestral martial artists chopped off his head. General Ma Yun-yi cried her heart out. Rumble! At the same time, the north gate was breached. Tens of thousands of rebel soldiers charged into the city. In front of them was a force of tens of thousands of civilians. It's over! Yun-yi fell heavily to the ground, her heart dead. She then took a deep breath and struggled to walk to the top of the city wall. Stop! Stop! The acting king waved his hand. The world suddenly quietened down. The acting king looked up at Yun-yi and sneered. Empress Dowager, if you knew this would happen, why did you do it? You win, Yun-yi said with difficulty, her voice hoarse. Let them go and I will let you do whatever you want to me. Do you think you are qualified to negotiate with me? The acting king sneered. Yun-yi said woodenly, Don't forget, the Imperial Jade Seal is in my hands, and so is the Commander's Seal. Also, the Emperor is in my hands. She then slowly stretched out her hand and grabbed the little Emperor in the distance. The little Emperor was caught in her hand. Mother, let go of me! The little Emperor struggled. He looked at the people below with a sad face and said, They are all my people. Even if you win the world, you will still need their support. The acting king was silent. Yun-yi ignored the little Emperor's struggle and said again, As long as you promise me not to massacre the city, I can give you the Imperial Jade Seal and the Commander's Seal. I can even ask His Majesty to abdicate the throne to you. She was extremely disappointed in the little Emperor. Between the dying wish of the late Emperor and the lives of millions of people, she finally chose the lives of millions of people. The acting king's expression changed a few times. He was slightly moved and said, If you obediently come down now, I may consider agreeing to your conditions. Yun-yi's body trembled when she heard this. How could she not know the other party's purpose? It was because he did not want her to die. Because everyone knew that the acting king was lustful. Under such circumstances, how could he let her go? Empress Dowager, you can't! Some of the surviving officials hurriedly knelt down. Empress Dowager, all the people knelt down. Yun-yi closed her eyes and her eyelashes trembled as if she was struggling in her heart. After a few seconds, she opened her eyes and smiled bitterly. Okay, I promise you. As her voice fell, many people were in pain. The Empress Dowager had sacrificed herself for them. Congratulations, Your Highness! Guifu jumped out and bowed to the acting king. Congratulations, Your Majesty. Not only did you win the world, you also won the beauty. The rest of the people also flattered him. Under everyone's gaze, Yun-yi leaped down from the city tower and walked toward the acting king step by step. The acting king's heart was stirred. It was as if he could see the beauty of spring in the night when the former was less than 10 steps away from him. He could not help but take a few steps forward and directly reach out to Yun-yi. From now on, you are my woman. Just as his hand was about to touch Yun-yi, an extremely indifferent voice suddenly sounded in the air. If you touch a single hair on her, I will kill your entire family and your 9 generations. End of this chapter. Chapter 1093. Longjing City. The flames of war raged and blood flowed like rivers. Yun-yi staggered as she slowly walked towards the acting king in the distance. With every step she took, her heart would die a little. Because she knew what she would face next. Either she would become a plaything, or she would become a puppet of authority. Therefore, when she saw the acting king reaching out his hand impatiently, she could not help but close her eyes as if she had accepted her fate. The moment she closed her eyes, it was a complete compromise. At that moment she heard a familiar voice. If you touch a single hair on her, I'll kill your entire family and your entire clan. The voice was neither loud nor soft, but it reverberated endlessly in the world, entering everyone's ears without missing a single word. At that moment, the acting king's outstretched hand froze. Everyone subconsciously looked in the direction of the voice. It was at that moment that Yun-yi, who had already accepted her fate, trembled slightly. She suddenly opened her eyes and looked at the world. Her beautiful eyes were filled with unconcealable excitement, disbelief, and even trembling. Is it Mr. Yi? At the next moment, a figure appeared from afar at some point in time. As the space distorted, the figure rushed over like lightning. It was a cold young man with fluttering white hair. He was holding a little girl in his right hand, and golden flames flickered in his eyes. His entire body was like a 10,000-year-old ice cube. Along with his appearance, the temperature in this area instantly dropped. It's really Mr. Yi. Looking at that face, even Yun-yi, who had always been determined, felt an indescribable emotion surging in her heart. In her clear eyes, there was a thick layer of mist condensing. She initially thought that Yi Chen had left because of what happened earlier. Even so, she did not blame Yi Chen. As Yi Chen was not related to her, he had no obligation to help her repeatedly. However, what she did not expect was, Yi Chen had come to save her. Your Highness, be careful. Almost at that moment, countless powerhouses stood in front of the acting king to protect him. They looked at Yi Chen vigilantly. It's him. Gu Yifu's expression changed. He then pointed at Yi Chen and said, Your Highness, this is the person with the surname Yi that you're looking for. The acting king's expression changed slightly when he heard that. He then glared at Yi Chen, trying to see through him. Under everyone's gaze, Yi Chen glanced around and eventually landed his gaze on Yun-yi. He then walked over to her step by step. Wherever he passed, many soldiers would be intimidated by his bearing, and they would subconsciously make way for him. A glint of killing intent flashed across the eyes of a martial ancestor realm expert. He stealthily gathered his strength, as if he was about to attack. However, he soon discovered that the white-haired young man only looked at him coldly with a hint of mockery. Just one look. That person's heart skipped a beat. He felt as if he had been seen through. His heart was filled with shock, and he unconsciously took a few steps back. Eventually, Yi Chen walked to Yun-yi's side step by step. Under the latter's complicated gaze, he said slowly, With me here today, no one can touch you. Hearing those words, Yun-yi felt her nose turn sour. She nearly started crying because of those words. However, the former suddenly said, But there's a condition. She could not help but chuckle. Under everyone's watchful eyes, Yi Chen turned around slowly and lifted his eyes to look around. When he saw the corpses that were piled up like a mountain, he shook his head secretly and looked at the surrounding rebels. His gaze landed on Gu Yifu and the rest as he grinned and said, Isn't this Prime Minister Gu? Why did you suddenly become the Prime Minister of the rebel army? How could Gu Yifu not hear the disdain in his words? He felt his face turn green and pale as he snorted coldly. His Highness is looking for you. There's a way out for you, but you chose to barge into hell instead. Are you the mad southern Yi who killed countless experts from my 8 kings? The acting king looked at Yi Chen with a grim expression. Yi Chen shook his head and said while smiling, I'm killing trash like you. As soon as that was said, a cold gleam flashed in the acting king's eyes. Then, as if he thought of something, he suddenly smiled and said, I thought you ran away, but I didn't expect you to come back. At this point, he could not help but glance at Yun Yi. You're here for her, aren't you? The Empress Dowager is actually secretly communicating with someone. Interesting, interesting. He seemed to be smiling in disdain. Even though his voice was not loud, it reached many people's ears. Many people subconsciously looked at Yun Yi. You're shameless. Yun Yi's pretty face turned livid. The acting king scoffed and looked at Yi Chen. I've heard that you're extraordinary. However, don't you think it's stupid for you to become enemies with me for a woman? He changed the topic. I'll give you a chance. As long as you're willing to submit to me, I can spare your life. Are you done? Yi Chen interrupted. Brat, you're courting death. A martial ancestor stage general was furious as killing intent surged in his eyes. At the next moment, his figure charged out directly as vast true energy surged. The pressure swept through heaven and earth. A ferocious punch that contained all his strength tore through the sky and charged at Yi Chen's head. However, Yi Chen's expression did not change at all in the face of such an attack. He merely lifted his palm and stretched it out gently. Noisy! Bang! A bloody mist splattered in the air. At this moment everyone was dumbfounded. He killed a martial ancestor with a single palm strike? So powerful! On the city gate tower, many people who were already in despair gasped when they saw this scene. Then, they were extremely excited and cheered. Compared to them, the rebel army camp was abnormally quiet. Countless people stared at Yi Chen in shock. The expressions of many powerhouses who did not believe in Yi Chen's achievements changed, especially those who were about to attack. They were glad. Clap, clap. The acting king's expression was extremely grim. He clapped and sneered. Killing martial ancestor stage masters is like killing dogs. No wonder you have the confidence to go against me. His eyes were filled with sharpness. Unfortunately, I specially prepared an opponent to guard against you. As soon as he said that, he slowly turned around and solemnly cupped his fists at the dense army. Lord Mo Su, I'll leave this person to you. As soon as he finished speaking, the dense army slowly dispersed. The dense army slowly dispersed, and an old man dressed in black beast skin slowly walked out. The old man was around 60 years old. His eyes were dark and fierce, and there was a flame mark between his brows. Although it was a mark, it emitted a bone-chilling coldness. The master of the northern barbarians, Mo Su, heavenly barbarian. Chapter 1094. There were many foreign tribes in the great dynasties. Their civilization was not as advanced as the humans in the cities. They even lived a primitive life of starvation. However, it was such a foreign tribe that the great dynasties could not destroy even after spending 1,000 years. Among them, the northern barbarians were the most powerful. The northern barbarians lived in the eastern part of Yuzhou that was filled with miasma. They worshipped gods and used fire as their totem. The spells they cultivated were extremely strange. Among the northern barbarians, the cultivation level was measured by the status of the tribe. Ordinary barbarians were called spiritual barbarians after activating their talent. Above spiritual barbarians were witchcraft barbarians, great barbarians, heavenly barbarians, and divine barbarians. Divine barbarians only existed in legends. Heavenly barbarians only appeared once every few hundred years. Once a heavenly barbarian appeared, it meant that the northern barbarians would reach their peak. 1,000 years ago, the founding emperor of the great dynasties, Lu Sigu, and the state preceptor had killed a heavenly barbarian. That was how they defeated the northern barbarians and chased them to the bitter cold. It was also that battle that caused Lu Sigu's injuries to act up and he died. At that time, Lu Sigu was the most powerful person in the north. Therefore, Yun-yi was so nervous when she saw the old man appear. Heavenly barbarians represented the martial king stage in martial Dao cultivation. Martial king. He was only one step away from the legendary martial saint. One must know that even in the great dynasties, only the state preceptor, Qi Tiandao, was a martial king. She was not the only one. Even many of the sect powerhouses under the acting king's command had a change of expression when they saw the old man appear. Yi Chen stood with his hands behind his back fearlessly. The moment the old man appeared, he sensed his cultivation base. He could only be considered a quasi-saint on earth. Mo Su, the master of the northern barbarians, ignored everyone's gazes. He then looked up at the acting king. After I kill this person, the northern barbarians want an additional state on top of the original condition. Why? The acting king was furious. Before this, in order to unite the northern barbarians, he promised to give the northern barbarians 2 states to live after he seized the throne. However, the other party wanted an additional state now. One must know that there were only 5 states in the entire great dynasties, but the northern barbarians wanted 3 states. How could he not be furious? Mo Su glanced at Yi Chen and said, "This person is more powerful than I imagined. I'll have to pay a high price to kill him." As soon as he said that, the acting king's expression changed. Clearly, he did not expect that the other party's evaluation of Yi Chen would be so high. Fine. He gritted his teeth. Mo Su then nodded lightly and walked to Yi Chen step by step. "Young man, you're very powerful. I don't want to be your enemy. However, I have to fight so that the northern barbarians won't continue to live in this bitter and cold land. I'll give you a chance to attack. If you disappoint me, I'll let you know what despair is," Yi Chen said expressionlessly. As his voice fell, including the acting king, Yun-yi, and the rest, everyone was stunned, thinking that they had heard wrong. That was an existence equivalent to a martial king. However, Yi Chen said that he would definitely die if he attacked. Mo Su's expression instantly turned cold. It was obvious that he was truly filled with killing intent. What an arrogant brat! With that, the flame mark between his brows began to tremble faintly. At the same time, an extremely dense vile energy spread out. Following the appearance of this vile energy, the temperature between heaven and earth suddenly dropped by dozens of degrees. Many soldiers standing nearby were instantly turned into popsicles. In an instant, at least thousands of people died. "Your Highness, retreat." A powerhouse's expression changed drastically. He protected the acting king and continued to retreat. This is the extraordinary fire seed of the northern barbarians. Once it's fully unleashed, everything within a radius of 3,000 meters will be frozen. "Brat, I'll show you the power of the northern barbarians' spells," Mo Su said coldly. Then, he raised his right hand and clenched his fist into the air. At that moment, a large amount of vile energy gathered in the air. A large amount of vile energy eventually condensed into a gigantic ice fist. As an ear-piercing roar sounded, the gigantic ice fist charged at Yi Chen. Sensing the commotion, Yun-yi's beautiful face turned pale. "Mr. Yu, a powerhouse," said to the acting king, "Your Highness Mo Su is indeed the heavenly barbarian of the northern barbarians. Even if that brat is a martial king, he will suffer from such methods." Under everyone's gaze, Yi Chen did not move at all. He allowed the gigantic ice fist to approach him. At that moment, he smirked coldly and waved his right hand at the ice fist. Then, the space around the gigantic ice fist started to distort, as if it was tearing the gigantic ice fist apart. Bang! As the air shook violently, the gigantic ice fist that was less than 3 meters away from Yi Chen exploded and turned into starlight that scattered. Whoosh! At that moment, countless people were in an uproar. The powerhouse who spoke earlier was in disbelief. The acting king's expression changed. "How is this possible? Emo Su's expression turned grim completely. Yi Chen placed his hands behind his back and looked at the former coldly. I've already given you a chance. You've disappointed me. As soon as he finished speaking, he stretched out his hand and grabbed at Emo Su. Rumble, a gigantic golden dragon claw appeared in the air. It was like a collapsing divine pillar that supported the sky, wanting to completely crush this world. The terrifying pressure caused everyone's hearts to tremble. They felt goosebumps all over their bodies. Holy Fire Barbarian Tattoo, open! Emo Su's expression changed drastically. Then, he roared and pointed at the flame mark between his brows. Buzz, under everyone's gazes, a white beam of light suddenly shot out from between his brows. The beam of light was like an ice pillar as it charged at the golden dragon claw in the air. Emo Su is going all out. Someone looked at Yi Chen and mumbled, "This brat can actually force Emo Su to use the barbarian's life-saving divinity." However, what happened in the next moment shocked him. Emo Su's white beam of light was directly grabbed by Yi Chen's golden dragon claw and exploded on the spot. The golden dragon claw did not slow down and grabbed Emo Su. Emo Su screamed as his body exploded. Even his soul was shattered by the golden dragon claw. He completely disappeared from the world. For a moment, the entire world was dead silent. The acting king's eyes widened and his expression froze. Yunyi covered her red lips lightly as if she had been petrified. The master of the northern barbarians, Emo Su, died just like that? Too powerful, too powerful! This person is simply invincible. After the dead silence, there was an earth-shattering gasp. Yunyi was so surprised that she almost fainted. Yi Chen looked straight at the stunned acting king and the rest in the distance. Then, he took a step forward and appeared before them in a flash. As if sensing his killing intent, the acting king's expression changed. He immediately said, "Senior, let's talk things out. Please listen to me. My mother is from the White Jade capital. You can't touch me." End of this chapter. Chapter 1095. I can't kill you? Yi Chen smiled disdainfully and pressed forward. However, at that moment, Yun-Yi seemed to have thought of something, and her expression changed suddenly. "Mr. Yi, you can't kill him." "Why?" Yi Chen turned around and looked at her. Yun-Yi rushed over and took a deep breath in. If the Great Dynasty and the Qing Dynasty are the two overlords of the northern region, then the White Jade capital is the true master of the northern region. Empress Dowager is right. The acting king seemed to see hope and said hurriedly, "The White Jade capital is a supreme force, also known as the Immortal Sect. They stand in the clouds and look down on the entire northern region. Aren't you the son of the late emperor?" Yi Chen said with a cold smile, "Your mother is also a member of the Great Dynasty. What does she have to do with the White Jade capital?" The acting king trembled violently when he sensed the killing intent in Yi Chen's eyes. He did not dare to hide anything. "My mother was a disciple of the White Jade capital. Back then, the late emperor also went to the White Jade capital to study. Later, he took my mother and left the White Jade capital." Yi Chen looked at Yun-Yi by instinct. Yun-Yi nodded with difficulty. "I've heard of this rumor. The White Jade capital's disciples are not allowed to marry people of the secular world. Therefore, after the late emperor took that woman away, the White Jade capital sent people to the world and forced that woman to death in front of everyone. The late emperor died of depression because of this. This was a secret of the royal family. Only a handful of people knew about it. She had only found out about it from the dusty secret files after she became the Empress Dowager. This was also the reason why the royal family did not dare to force the acting king too much even though they knew that he wanted to rebel. They were afraid that the White Jade capital would take action. Yi Chen looked at the acting king with a faint smile. "If that's the case, I'm afraid the White Jade capital can't wait for me to kill you, right?" "No." The acting king's face immediately turned pale. "There are many factions in the White Jade capital. My mother was forced to death by the enemy faction. If you kill me, my mother's family will definitely take revenge for me. At this point, he continued, also, my mother's family blamed the late emperor for my mother's death, so they secretly ordered me to rebel. Everything I did was ordered by them. Yi Chen's eyes flickered when he heard that. He didn't expect that the civil war of a major dynasty would actually involve so many twists and turns of the past. Seeing that he did not say a word, the acting king thought that he was afraid and said, "Senior, as long as you don't kill me, I will definitely." However, Yi Chen could not be bothered to listen to him begging for mercy. He slapped with his palm and did not hold back at all. He directly erased that person from time to time. "Mr. Yi, you've caused a huge disaster." Yun Yi faintly sighed. "The acting king is dead?" When they saw the acting king turn into a bloody mist, all the rebel soldiers were shocked and incredulous. "Run, run quickly!" It was Unknown who cried out in alarm, but without saying a word, they all turned into afterimages and fled in all directions. "No one will be able to escape today," Yi Chen scoffed. Subsequently, his divine consciousness spread out in a frenzy. He waved his sleeve, and a purple gleam shot into the sky. Rumble, in an instant, the true martial thousand lightning sword streaked across the sky and directly arrived behind the dozen martial ancestor realm experts, killing them one by one. As for the rest of the defeated army, Yi Chen could not be bothered to intervene. He grabbed Yun Yi's shoulder and flew into the city directly. In the palace of the great dynasty, Yi Chen lifted his hand and set up a barrier. Then, he said under Yun Yi's confused gaze, "Have you seen the ghost ship?" Before this, he had originally planned to leave the northern region through the wormhole. However, he accidentally found out that the ghost ship had appeared in the northern region, and Yun Yi was a witness. Therefore, that was the reason why he came back to save Yun Yi this time. As soon as he said that, Yun Yi took a few steps back subconsciously. Then, she looked at him with hatred. "Who exactly are you?" She looked at Yi Chen with vigilance, but there was more hatred, as if she was looking at an enemy. Yi Chen did not expect her attitude to change so drastically. He could not help but frown. "It doesn't matter who I am. You just need to answer my question. You have to know that if I want to harm you, you won't be able to resist. Moreover, I've seen the ghost ship before, and my wife's disappearance is related to the ghost ship." The moment that was said, Yun Yi's tense expression finally loosened. "Why, you've seen the ghost ship too?" "That's right." Yi Chen nodded lightly. The hall fell silent immediately. Yun Yi stared at him as if she was trying to see something. After a while, she smiled bitterly. "Mr. Yi, I believe you." She sat on the chair gently and looked like she was recalling something. "Mr. Yi, I'm sorry. I lied to you. I told you that I've been hiding my feelings since I was young, but I'm not." Yi Chen said nothing. After all, who did not have a secret? Yun Yi said softly, "I'm actually the daughter of the king of Hanhai. The king of Hanhai is a sea region between the Great Dynasty and the Qing Dynasty. It's also a tributary of the Tianfeng Sea region. A year and a half ago, I was traveling with my father on the sea with my maidservant. However, I found a ghost ship heading toward us. There were powerhouses fighting on the ship." Yi Chen could not help but squint when he heard that. A year and a half? If he counted the beginning of the spiritual energy recovery on Earth, it had indeed been more than a year since they parted. That battle was earth-shattering. My father was a martial king, but he was still afraid. At that time, he escorted me away decisively. However, those people discovered us in the end. Some of them came to kill us. My father stayed behind and caused a tsunami. I was swept into the tsunami. At this point, Yun Yi's brows were filled with fear. When I woke up, I found out that I was saved by a family from the Great Dynasty. Later on, I heard that the Hanhai clan was wiped out overnight. After that, this family was attacked by their political enemies and their property was confiscated. I was also locked up in the Yao court. Did you see the scene on the ghost ship clearly? Yi Chen grasped the key information and asked, For example, how many people were on the ship? Who were the people fighting? We were too far away, so we couldn't see clearly. Yunyi shook her head and said, however, there seemed to be a few powerful existences attacking an old man. The old man was protecting a few people at that time. He was like a god of death, killing everywhere. Yi Chen's eyes focused when he heard that. Was that old man crazy? Were there 3 people behind him? 1 man, 2 women, and a little girl? Just as he finished speaking, Yun-Yi suddenly raised her head and looked at him with a strange gaze. Mr. Yi, how did you know? Boom! At that moment, a rumble sounded in Yi Chen's mind. Endless joy surged within him. It was them. It was really them. Yuhan and his parents. End of this chapter. Chapter 1096. Yi Chen really did not expect that. Yun-Yi actually saw the ghost ship, and the people on it were Su Yuhan and her parent. Yun-Yi's expression changed slightly as if she had sensed the change in his state of mind. Then, she said in shock, Mr. Yi, is your wife on the ship? Yi Chen openly admitted it when he met her gaze. That's right. My wife went missing because of the ghost ship. Daddy, can we see Mommy now? The little girl finally understood what the 2 of them were talking about. She looked at Yi Chen in anticipation. Yi Chen smiled softly. Soon? Yun-Yi's face turned pale when she heard that. She suddenly felt a pain in her heart for no reason. It was as if she had lost something. She took a deep breath in and forced a smile. But you must be careful, Mr. Yi. The people fighting on the ghost ship were very powerful. I suspect that they are the legendary martial saints. Martial saints. This term was a legend in the northern region and even in the ancient, desolate realm. The power they represented was unimaginable. The so-called martial saints were people who had reached the pinnacle of martial Tao. The ancient, desolate realm was prosperous in both literature and martial arts. Only martial saints could fight against martial saints. As for martial saints, they were scholars who had become saints. Scholars did not cultivate true energy or their physique. They used literature to cultivate and sense the truth of heaven and earth. A literary grandmaster's physique was not much stronger than a mortal's. They would still catch a cold and cough. However, a word of gold could change the weather, and a painting could trigger lightning. Yun-Yi had never seen a martial saint or a martial saint in her life, even though she was the Empress Dowager of one of the 2 overlords of the northern region. Yi Chen's expression was calm when he heard what she said. Although the cultivation systems of the ancient desolate realm and earth were similar, there were differences. They were more ancient and rigorous. Based on the people he killed today, the supreme giant on earth was equivalent to the martial ancestor of the ancient desolate realm. A martial king was equivalent to a quasi-saint on earth. In that case, a martial saint would definitely be equivalent to a saint on earth. More than 1 or 2 saints had died in Yi Chen's hands. Therefore, Yi Chen only smiled at Yun-Yi's kindness. Even though the ancient desolate realms system was larger and the quality of the martial artists was stronger than on earth, Yi Chen was not afraid. After all, apart from him, Ying, the patriarch of hell, and Yi Wushuang were all martial saints. He shook his head and said, Where did this ghost ship appear from, and where did it disappear from? I'm not sure either. Yun-Yi's eyes dimmed. I only know that I once saw it on the Immensity Sea. Then I fell into the water and fainted. Since then, it disappeared from the northern region. She wanted to find the ghost ship more than Yi Chen. This was because she remembered that before she fainted, she had been chased by the powerhouses on the ghost ship. In order to save her, her father had stayed behind to bring up the rear and then disappeared with the ghost ship. No one knew if he was alive or dead. Yi Chen could not help but feel rather disappointed. The ghost ship's whereabouts were uncertain, but no matter what, it would eventually appear where there was water. However, there was no trace of it in the northern region. This meant that the ghost ship was only passing through the Immensity Sea. The northern region was not the ghost ship's final destination. Thinking of this, he asked, Did you just say that the Immensity Sea is a tributary of the Tianfeng Sea area? That's right. Yun-Yi nodded slightly. Then, as if she had guessed what he was thinking, she said, however, the Tianfeng Sea area is rather special. It borders the northern region, the southern region, the eastern wilderness, the western desert, and the central state at the same time. Yi Chen could not help but frown. Initially, he had planned to go to the Tianfeng Sea area to investigate the ghost ship. Now that he heard Yun-Yi's words, he was even more confused. The Tianfeng Sea area was connected to the other 4 territories at the same time. Didn't that mean that he had to search them one by one? Right at this moment, a thought flashed through his mind, and he raised his head to look outside the hall. There were people walking towards the barrier he had set up. However, they were several civil officials and a few generals. With a wave of his sleeve, he removed the barrier. Soon, a few people walked in quickly. They heaved a sigh of relief when they saw that Yi Chen and Yun-Yi's clothes were clean. Empress Dowager, Mr. Yi, the leading general, Yun-Yi, said respectfully to Yi Chen, "Countless rebels have fled. May I ask if we should give the order to chase after them?" When he said that, everyone, including him, was filled with excitement. They had won this battle. They had defeated hundreds of thousands of soldiers with less than 30,000. And all of this was thanks to one person. Everyone looked at Yi Chen as they thought to this point. Their eyes were filled with endless respect. At that moment, Yi Chen was no different from a god to them. He was even considered the guardian of a large sect. Yun-Yi shook her head and said, "General Mo, don't chase after a cornered enemy. Withdraw your troops now, count the casualties, repair the city walls, and prevent them from returning." They only had 30,000 troops. Even if the rebels fled, they could not chase after them. After all, any small group of rebels would cause great casualties. "Yes." General Mo bowed heavily and hesitated to speak. "Empress Dowager, although the acting king is dead, there are still 7 kings. Moreover, the Grand Preceptor is still fighting against the enemy at the border." Yun-Yi sighed softly. "I understand." Yun-Yi and Yi Chen stood side by side in Longjing. The two of them quietly looked at the mess after the battle and the countless people who were crying while hugging the corpses. Yun-Yi turned around and asked about the young emperor's whereabouts. However, she was told that the young emperor had returned to the palace and had taken 1,000 troops to protect her. "The sect has let you down, I've let you down, and His Majesty has let you down." She bowed deeply to everyone as a stream of tears slowly flowed down her cheeks. On the street, a young man knelt in front of an old man. His face was filled with joy after surviving a calamity. The young man was Ding Peng, who had taken the initiative to climb the city gate tower and protect the front line as an archer. "Little Peng has grown up and can protect us. You've really done us proud." "That's right, I saw little Peng kill many rebels with my own eyes." There were many commoners surrounding him, praising him in all sorts of ways. Ding Peng immediately revealed a look of surprise. At this moment, a middle-aged woman dressed in festive clothes stepped forward and said with her hands on her waist, "Little Peng, I'm the matchmaker from the east of the city. Just now, Steward Feng from the east of the city told me that he agreed to your marriage with Min Min. He's also willing to give your family 100 acres of fertile land and 2 cows as dowry." As soon as this was said, the crowd burst into an uproar. Many people looked at Ding Peng with envy. Little Peng is in luck. Feng Yuanhui's family is extremely wealthy, especially his daughter. She's not an ordinary beauty. Little Peng is a man who protects the country. If I have a daughter, I'd be willing to marry him. Lame Chern, come on. You're already 50 years old and you're still an old bachelor. You still have a daughter? Even if you do, she'll definitely be a rotten melon. Little Peng won't like her at all. End of this chapter. Chapter 1097. Ding Peng's face turned red when he heard that. He could not help but recall what Blackie had said before he died. "Little Peng, you're still a virgin, right? Promise me, Uncle Tai Zhu, don't die, live well and ask your grandpa to find a wife for you. The taste of a woman is really wonderful. That white thigh, that degeo, tsk. Ding Peng's eyes turned hot. He pushed the crowd aside and looked around the street as if he was looking for something. Then, he saw a woman carrying a child in the distance. She was kneeling on a stretcher covered with white cloth. Plop! Ding Peng took a few steps forward and knelt heavily in front of the stretcher. Tears flowed out of his eyes. If Big Blackie hadn't pushed him just now, the one lying on the stretcher would have been him. His life had been exchanged for Blackie's. Blackie had parents and children, and his entire family depended on him to make a living. However, he was willing to give up his life to save Ding Peng, who was single. Sister-in-law, my condolences. Ding Peng looked at the expressionless wife in front of him. His lips moved slightly, and he felt extremely guilty. At this moment, a loud voice came from behind, "The Empress Dowager has arrived." Swoosh! The crowd immediately knelt down. Even Ding Peng and the woman were no exception. Yun-yi looked at the corpse on the stretcher with a complicated expression and said to the woman, "The imperial court will be responsible for your family's future. Your child can study in the Royal Academy in the future, and his food and accommodation will be free. Thank you, Empress Dowager." The woman's eyes finally had a glimmer of light. The people around were extremely envious. They hated themselves for hesitating and not joining the army. Yun-yi then looked at Yun-yi with a gentle gaze. "What's your name?" She had a deep impression of Ding Peng. Yun-yi had a deep impression of him. During the tragic battle earlier, the scene of Ding Peng, who had gone crazy because of Blackie's death, killing more than 10 people, attracted her attention. Empress Dowager, I am called Ding Peng." Ding Peng was extremely nervous. The Empress Dowager actually talked to me. She even asked for my name. The Empress Dowager is so beautiful, like a fairy who has descended to the mortal world. That Goddess Yi and the Empress Dowager are really compatible. He could not help but glance at Yi Chen next to Yun-yi. His eyes were filled with admiration. The child in Immortal Ye's arms should be born from him and the Empress Dowager, right? Ding Peng. Yun-yi repeated the name several times, then nodded slightly. "Good name, I'll remember you. Go back and wait for the news." She turned around and left with Yi Chen after saying that. An hour later, when the clean-up work was in full swing, a fast horse passed through the crowded streets and went straight to the palace. "Empress Dowager, Your Majesty!" A man dismounted from the horse and panted heavily. "The imperial advisor is surrounded and is in grave danger. Please send troops to save him." With that, the man died on the spot. The scene was silent. The imperial tutor was surrounded. Didn't that mean that the border was already on the verge of life and death? Once the enemy country's army of 500,000 broke through, it would be the most serious moment. Yun-yi looked at Yi Chen with a pleading expression as if she was grasping at straws. "Mr. Yi? Fine, I'll make another move." Yi Chen shook his head lightly. Subsequently, he set up a sword gleam and left under everyone's gaze. He had a good impression of Qi Tiandao. Although he was not familiar with him, he was willing to consume his lifespan to deduce Su Yuhan's whereabouts for him the first time they met. Even though he had a request, he seemed to be open and aboveboard. Moreover, Yi Chen had promised to protect the sect for 3 months. Upon seeing this, many ministers praised sincerely, "Mr. Yi is truly a godly person." Yun-yi looked around and suddenly asked the old eunuch beside her, "Where's His Majesty?" "His Majesty said that he's tired and needs to rest." The old eunuch hesitated. At this moment of life and death, His Majesty can actually sleep. Yun-yi was getting more and more disappointed. At the border of the Great Dynasty, at Tiger Xiong Pass, the enemy country, the Qing Kingdom, led 500,000 troops to attack Tiger Xiong Pass. The imperial tutor, Qi Tiandao, led 200,000 troops to the south to rescue them. The price of 200,000 against 500,000 was that the Great Dynasty failed to defend the city. The 200,000 troops were reduced to less than 50,000 troops, and they were forced to retreat. At that moment, the flames of war had already spread into the pass. Smoke filled the city, and flames shot into the sky. Corpses piled up on the road. In the air, a dozen figures formed a sword formation, surrounding an old man in a purple robe. If one looked closely, they would realize that these figures all emitted the aura of a martial ancestor. The leader was a middle-aged man in white. It was the Qing Kingdom's military advisor, Gu Jianqiu. Gu Jianqiu slashed at the old man in the purple robe. As the sword gleam swept across, Qi Tiandao's expression changed slightly, and he retreated quickly. Today, the number one people of the two dynasties finally fought, and they were both martial kings. Boom! At the same time, the 12 figures around him shot out 12 sword gleams, sealing off Qi Tiandao's escape route. Boom! Qi Tiandao swept the horsetail whisk in his hand, but he realized that the 12 sword gleams were mutually reinforcing. Every time they were shattered, they would condense again in the blink of an eye. Gu Jianqiu held his sword in the air, and said with a faint smile, "Brother Qi, what do you think of my 12 heavenly star sword formation?" The so-called 12 heavenly star sword formation was a formation formed by 12 martial ancestor-level sword sons, with him as the sword formation's core. This sword formation was filled with an extremely sharp attack aura. Even martial kings would not be able to get away with it. "Gu Jianqiu, you've hidden it well." Qi Tiandao coughed violently, and blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. "In order to deal with me, you've secretly trained 12 sword sons who are at the level of 5 kings. The 8 kings have led 1,000,000 troops to the capital of your great dynasty, and I've led 500,000 troops to hold you back." Gu Jianqiu waved his hand gently, and the 12 sword sons dispersed. Only then did he say, "Brother Qi, your sect is completely finished this time. Why are you still struggling?" "My sect has its own destiny. It's not something that the Qing kingdom can destroy just because you want to." Qi Tiandao was like an old man with one foot in the grave, and his gaze was very calm. His calmness made Gu Jianqiu secretly frown. Then, he seemed to have thought of something. "That's right, I've forgotten someone. This person's name is Mad Southern Yi. Do you think that this person can come and save you?" Speaking to this point, he could not help but reveal a look of pity. "I have the 12 heavenly cycle star sword formation. Even if this Mad Southern Yi is a martial king, he can't save you. Give up." Cough, cough, cough. Qi Tiandao's aura was weak, but his thin and weak body did not move at all. "I believe in destiny. I believe in Mr. Yi. Send the great grand imperial advisor on his way." Gu Jianqiu bowed heavily. As soon as he finished speaking, the 12 sword sons around him quickly changed their positions. The sword formation suddenly changed, and in the end, it actually turned into a giant sword that slashed toward Qi Tiandao. "Previous emperors, I've tried my best." Qi Tiandao closed his eyes slightly. This existence that had protected the sect for 1,000 years was now an arrow at the end of its flight. If such a loyal person were born in the Qing kingdom, perhaps I could still be friends with you. What a pity, Gu Jianqiu sighed softly. Just as the giant light sword was about to slash Qi Tiandao's body, it suddenly stopped, as if a pair of invisible hands had grabbed it. At the same time, an extremely calm voice suddenly exploded like a clap of thunder. "If you want to kill him, you have to first ask for my opinion." End of this chapter. Chapter 1098. This voice was like the might of heaven and earth, shaking the surroundings. This voice spread to every corner of the void. Even the soldiers on both sides who were fighting fiercely on the ground stopped at this moment. "Fellow Yi." Qi Tiandao suddenly opened his eyes, and a hint of surprise and gratification flashed across his eyes. At this moment, he really wanted to laugh. Laugh out loud. Qi Tiandao was right. Yi Chen was the hope of the dynasty. Is he really here? Gu Jianqiu narrowed his eyes and hurriedly urged the 12 sword sons. Kill him, quick! After saying that, his gaze fixed on the void, trying to find the whereabouts of the person who spoke. The 12 sword sons activated their full strength, trying to control the giant sword in the sky to slash Qi Tiandao. At the next moment, as space distorted, a figure suddenly appeared behind Qi Tiandao. The person reached out and gently grabbed the tip of the sword. Rumble, the gigantic sword shattered with a loud bang. Blurg, the 12 sword sons spat blood at the same time, and their bodies flew out uncontrollably. Only after they stabilized themselves did they look at the person who had attacked them with faces full of shock. It was a white-haired young man with a cold expression. He was carrying a 6-year-old girl in one hand and had the other hand behind his back. At that moment, Gu Jianqiu's expression changed, and his eyes were filled with shock. One strike. With just one strike, their formation was broken, and the 12 martial masters were severely injured. Even he could not do such a thing. He stared at Yi Chen as he thought to this point. Then, he cupped his fists slightly. Are you mad, Southern Yi? He had heard of Yi Chen's name through his spies earlier. He thought it was an exaggeration, but he did not expect it to be even more terrifying than the rumors said. Yi Chen glanced at him calmly. Since you know it's me, you should lead your troops and scram now. As expected of the mad Southern. Hearing such arrogant words, not only was Gu Jianqiu not angered, a hint of admiration appeared in his eyes instead. Fellow Yi, as far as I know, you're not from the dynasty. Why do you have to interfere in the matter between our two countries? Speaking of this, he said with incomparable sincerity, as long as you leave, whatever the great dynasties can give, the Qing kingdom can also give. I'm only here for the promise. It has nothing to do with benefit. Yi Chen chuckled softly. Gu Jianqiu immediately revealed a regretful expression upon hearing this, but he did not back down. In that case, I can only offend you. With that, the long sword on his back began to tremble faintly, as if it could be unsheathed at any time. Yi Chen squinted slightly with a terrifying gaze. I only have one chance to attack you. Are you sure you want to attack? Meeting his gaze, Gu Jianqiu's heart faintly trembled. He then smiled bitterly and said, I am an official of the Qing kingdom. Dying for the Qing kingdom is my mission. Clang, with a sword hum that shook the 9 heavens, a dazzling sword light bloomed behind him. Yi Chen shook his head lightly. Just when he was about to attack, Qi Tiandao, who was next to him, suddenly said, Fellow Yi, this is a fated battle between you and me. I hope you won't interfere. Are you sure? Yi Chen could not help but look at him. At that moment, the vitality in his body had been exhausted. The reason why he had survived until now was all due to his perseverance. If he sat down and recuperated, he might be able to live for a few more days with Yi Chen's medicinal pills. I'm sure. As if he had guessed what he was thinking, Qi Tiandao smiled calmly. I've been fighting with Brother Gu for many years. It's time to end it before my time is up. As soon as he said that, he took a step forward and instantly leaped over 30 meters, heading straight for Gu Jianqiu. He laughed loudly and said, Brother Gu, do you dare to fight me? Why wouldn't I? Gu Jianqiu also laughed loudly and took the initiative to welcome him with his sword. Almost at that moment, the 12 sword sons seemed to want to help, but they realized that Yi Chen had glanced at them. Just that glance alone shocked them. It was as if they were being watched by a ferocious beast, and they did not dare to move at all. Rumble, in the air, Gu Jianqiu and Qi Tiandao officially fought. The two of them no longer concealed their auras and attacked with all their might. This was a battle between the number 1 person of a major dynasty and the number 1 person of the Qing dynasty. It was also a battle between 2 countries. The armies of both countries stared at this scene. An extremely dense purple sun rose up in the sky, welcoming the terrifying sword wills that were coming at it. An hour later, the 2 figures looked at each other from afar. Gu Jianqiu stood proudly in the air with his sword in hand. He looked at Qi Tiandao from afar and said, You've lost. Someone saw that his right hand, which was holding the sword, was trembling non-stop. Dark red blood flowed down from his wrist and dyed the sword red. Yes, I've lost. A smile appeared at the corner of Qi Tiandao's lips, but I see a new emperor rising. One day, he will sweep through the ancient desolate realm like a prairie fire. He fell heavily from the sky after saying that. Yi Chen took a step forward and caught him from the air. Sensing the former's eyes, his expression was a little complicated. Do you have any last words? The Emperor's star descends to the south. The true dragon returns to the leaf. Qi Tiandao held on to his last breath and looked at Yi Chen calmly. If my sect has let you down, you can replace me. Be careful of the white jade capital. After saying that, he stopped breathing. Grand Preceptor. On the ground, the remaining tens of thousands of imperial troops knelt on one knee, their faces filled with sorrow. The Grand Preceptor had protected their sect for 1,000 years. Today's legend had finally come to an end. At the same time, the 12 sword sons rushed towards Gu Jianqiu. One of them said, Master, Qi Tiandao is dead. There's no one else in the sect. Why don't we take this opportunity? Wah! Gu Jianqiu suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. Go quickly, retreat! Although the 12 sword sons were unwilling, they knew that their master was also seriously injured, so they immediately gave the order to retreat. Yi Chen did not stop them from leaving. Instead, he carried Qi Tiandao's body and flew towards Longjing. On the way less than 100 kilometers away from Longjing, the weather suddenly changed. It was clearly the end of spring, but it was snowing heavily. The snow got heavier and heavier. In the end, it covered a radius of 100 kilometers, including Longjing, into a world of ice and snow. The snow was extremely strange. In just an hour, more than 1,000 people had frozen to death. Even the people who had lived in Longjing for generations had never seen such abnormal weather. Yi Chen, on the other hand, stopped in his tracks. Murderous intent. He could feel a strong murderous intent from this endless snow. His gaze shot into the sky and realized that the snow did not fall from the clouds in the sky. Instead, it appeared silently from the void. When he arrived at Longjing, he saw that everyone, including Yun Yi, were standing on the city wall, looking to the west. There was a small boat floating in the air. The boat did not have a mast, and it was snow-white. There was not a single person on it. However, there was a melodious sound of a flute coming from the boat. The temperature in this area became colder. White Jade Capital. Yun Yi was almost trembling as she said in fear, "The White Jade Capital's envoy is here." End of this chapter. Chapter 1099. White Jade Capital. The White Jade Capital's envoy is here. Above Longjing, Yun Yi's body trembled. Her face was extremely pale as she looked at the small boat floating from the west. The sound of the flute was long and melodious, but it was incomparably cold, as if it made this world of ice and snow even sharper. Although the people behind him did not know the origin of the boat, they could sense that it was extraordinary, and they looked extremely nervous. Yi Chen carried Qi Tiandao's corpse and stared at the boat for a few seconds. Then, he landed on the city wall in a flash. Mr. Yi, the Grand Preceptor. Yun Yi's face turned pale as she looked at the corpse in Yi Chen's hand. Her voice was trembling. He took advantage of the end of his life to heavily injure the Qing Kingdom's military advisor, Gu Jianqiu, and come into contact with the border crisis. Yi Chen said calmly. As soon as he finished speaking, Yun Yi fell heavily to the ground. Yun Yi fell heavily to the ground, unable to hold back her tears. State Preceptor, rest in peace. Grand Preceptor. At this moment, everyone on the city wall knelt heavily on the ground, their faces filled with grief. The Grand Preceptor was dead. The protector who had protected them for 1,000 years had finally died for the sect. Whoosh! At the same time, the small boat floating in the air was getting closer and closer. Mr. Yi, the White Jade Capital's envoy, is here. Our sect is completely finished. Yun Yi's expression changed drastically. Is this the white jade capital you told me about before? Yi Chen stared at the approaching boat as his eyes flickered. Before the acting king of the 8 kings died, he had said that his mother was from the white jade capital and threatened Yi Chen not to kill him. There's a legend in the northern region. Yun Yi bit her lip and said with great difficulty, that is, when a small boat floating in the snow appears, the country it appears in will be destroyed. There are many dynasties in the northern region, but no matter how powerful they are, as long as this small boat appears in the country, they will be destroyed. Even the Sex and the Qin kingdom are no exception. Yi Chen could not help but take a deep look at the small boat that was less than 3,000 meters away from them when he heard that. Gradually, he was able to see some clues. There was nothing wrong with the small boat, but the problem was with the fluttering sounds. The fluttering sounds were the key to triggering the snowstorm phenomenon. He looked around the city again and found that almost every household had their doors closed and were burning firewood to keep themselves warm. At this rate, everyone in the city would be frozen to death in less than a month under the cold winter snow. No wonder it could wipe out a country. Mr. Yi, don't say anything later. Leave everything to me. At that moment, Yun Yi suddenly lifted her head and looked at Yi Chen. She said with concern, you killed the acting king. They're definitely here to punish you. Let me see if there's any room for negotiation. Although she said that, she didn't have the slightest bit of confidence in her heart. White Jade Capital. Such an existence in the Kunlun ruins was no different from a land of immortals. Very few people knew of their existence. However, it also existed in the hearts of the supreme rulers of the dynasties, and was regarded as a transcendent existence that stood above all living beings in the northern region. Yi Chen said nothing. Ever since he started cultivating, he had never retreated from anything, and he did not regret killing the acting king. When Yun Yi saw his expression, she became anxious. She was afraid that he would offend the White Jade Capital's messenger. Not long after, the small boat stopped less than 30 meters away from them. As the fluttering sounds disappeared, a figure slowly walked out from the cabin. It was a person wearing a bamboo hat. No one could see his face clearly, let alone tell if he was a man or a woman. The only thing that was eye-catching was the green flute in his hand. With the appearance of this person, the temperature between heaven and earth seemed to drop by dozens of degrees. Yun Yi took a deep breath in and suppressed the fear in her heart. She bowed to the man and said, Empress Dowager Yun Yi of the Great Dynasty greets the Lord Envoy. Do you know why I'm here? The man in the bamboo hat raised his eyes slightly and sized up the world. His tone was like a god looking down on all living beings, causing one to shudder. As soon as he finished speaking, Yun Yi's heart sank. She hurriedly said, Lord Envoy, please listen to my explanation. Did I allow you to speak? The man in the bamboo hat snorted coldly. The next moment, Yun Yi felt as if a mountain had fallen on her, causing her to spit out a mouthful of blood. Her face was extremely pale. Impudent! How dare you injure the Empress Dowager? A martial ancestor realm fighter flew into a rage. His figure flashed as he suddenly attacked the man in the bamboo hat. The others were also extremely furious. The man in the bamboo hat only glanced at him. Just one glance. The space around the martial ancestor realm fighter suddenly condensed and compressed his body into a bloody mist. The entire process was completed in the blink of an eye. Dead silence. The entire place was dead silent. Everyone's eyes widened as they stared at the man in the bamboo hat. Their eyes were filled with deep fear and shock. He killed a martial ancestor realm fighter with just a glance? At this moment, they finally realized that the man in the bamboo hat's strength was probably beyond their imagination. After seeing the martial ancestor realm fighter die, Yun Yi slightly closed her eyes, her expression sorrowful. However, she did not dare to speak. She did not dare to complain at all. This was because the man in the bamboo hat was a messenger from the White Jade Capital. Putting aside the significance of the white jade capital in the northern region, the man's terrifying strength was not something they could contend with. "Who killed that piece of trash?" the man in the bamboo hat asked slowly. He did not even look at the bloody mist in the air. It was as if he had just killed an ant. However, the entire place was silent. No one answered him. Many people looked at him with fear in their eyes, but most of them were filled with resentment. It was one thing for the man in the bamboo hat to kill someone over a disagreement. He had even forced the Empress Dowager to kneel before him. How could they not be enraged? "No one can speak?" The man in the bamboo hat did not get angry. Instead, he laughed. Then, he suddenly grabbed the air at the person closest to him. "Since you're unwilling to speak, then you might as well be dead." The person immediately felt an irresistible and terrifying suction force. Then, he was uncontrollably shot toward the man in the bamboo hat. The man in the bamboo hat lifted him into the air. "Are you going to speak or not?" The man struggled violently in the air. His face was as red as a pig's liver. He continued to sneer. "I don't understand what you're saying." "Very well." The man in the bamboo hat nodded lightly. Nobody could tell if he was happy or angry. "Don't worry. After you die, I'll bury everyone in the city with you." Killing intent flashed through his eyes after saying that. At that moment, an extremely cold voice came from the side. "I'll give you a chance. Let's see if you can kill this man before me." As soon as that was said, Yun Yi's body trembled violently. She felt like all the energy in her body had been sucked out. Despair filled her face. "P.S. To explain the reason why I didn't update yesterday. I was visiting a relative with a new car and accidentally hit the fence by the roadside. I've been negotiating with the insurance company until late at night. I sent the car to Shirley for repairs before the sun rose this morning and only returned at night. I'm sorry to everyone. I'll update as usual tomorrow." End of this chapter. Chapter 1100. I'll give you a chance to. Let's see if you can kill this person in front of me. Under everyone's gaze, Yi Chen stood up slowly. Yun Yi was on the verge of breaking down as she tried to persuade him. "Mr. Yi, this has nothing to do with you. Go back now." "That's right, Mr. Yi. The acting king died in defeat. It has nothing to do with you." The others also spoke up one after another, their faces filled with anxiety. Although no one knew who the man in the bamboo hat was apart from Yun Yi, they could tell from the way he killed a martial master with a raise of his eyes. Such an existence was definitely not inferior to Yi Chen, or someone more powerful than him. Yi Chen smiled lightly at everyone's persuasion and walked toward the man in the bamboo hat slowly. The man in the bamboo hat looked at Yi Chen quietly. He realized that he could not see through Yi Chen's background with his cultivation base. It was as if Yi Chen was an ordinary person. He could not help but sneer as he thought to this point, "Do you dare to repeat what you just said?" Although that was what he said, his eyes were filled with dense killing intent. He was a member of the White Jade Capital. To the northern region, he was like a god that stood in the clouds. Now, an ant had taken the initiative to provoke him. "Lord Envoy, can you listen to me?" Yun Yi bit the bullet and said, "This has nothing to do with." Before he could finish, he saw Yi Chen's expression remain unchanged. He extended his hand slowly. "Hand him to me, and I'll leave your corpse intact." The moment that was said, everyone fell silent. Yun Yi was in complete despair. The other party was the White Jade Capital's envoy. "Brat, you're courting death." After a few seconds of silence, the man in the bamboo hat emitted extreme killing intent. "Not only will this person die today, but all of you will die too." With that, he suddenly slapped the person in his hand. However, in the next moment, he realized that when his hand was about to touch the person in his hand, it suddenly shook violently. It was as if there was an invisible force in the air that was restraining him tightly. "You actually hid your cultivation base?" The man in the bamboo hat suddenly looked at Yi Chen. "No wonder you dare to speak to me in such a tone. But so what? Anyone who dares to offend the white jade capital will die, no matter who you are. Rumble, as his voice fell, the aura on his body increased. The aura on his body grew stronger, and the cold air within a radius of 1,000 feet instantly froze. The snowflakes in the air were completely still. It was as if he was standing there, and the area around him was his domain, controlling everything. Peak Martial King Yun Yi's expression was one of shock. Above Martial King was Martial Sage. As for Peak Martial Kings, they had already come into contact with the laws of heaven and earth. When they stood within their domains, they were impenetrable and unbreakable. They were truly undefeatable. Some of the Wuzongs present were even more shocked. Faced with such an aura, they discovered that the true energy in their bodies had been frozen. It was as if they had become ordinary people, unable to move at all. However, to everyone's disbelief, Yi Chen was still taking a stroll in his opponent's domain. He shook his head and said, "Is that all you're capable of?" A surprise flashed through the man in the bamboo hat's eyes. Clearly, he did not expect Yi Chen to not react at all under his territory. However, he immediately sneered and lightly waved the green flute in his hand. Boom! At that moment, the frozen ice and snow in the void instantly connected together. From afar, it looked like a huge piece of steel. Die! The man in the bamboo hat shouted softly. The torrent of ice and snow around him charged at Yi Chen instantly. Even the void collapsed because of the might. Mr. Yi Yun Yi's heart was in her throat. Yi Chen's expression remained the same. He used his finger as a saber and slashed at the air gently. Crack, crack, crack. Soon after, everyone heard the faint sound of glass shattering. Then, they saw the ice that filled the sky shatter. With Yi Chen as the center, a white waterfall that was 30 meters wide pierced through, splitting the space into two. I didn't expect there to be a talent like you in the northern region. What a surprise! The man in the bamboo hat's expression finally changed slightly. He looked at Yi Chen with a grim gaze. If you kneel down and acknowledge me as your master now, I might spare your life. You talk too much. Yi Chen scoffed coldly. He took a step forward and the air rippled. Subsequently, he struck out with his palm like a mountain rising from the ground. Martial Spirit's Light. At that moment, the man in the bamboo hat had goosebumps all over his body. Then, he roared. Under everyone's gazes, a tiger's roar suddenly came from within his body. Then, a tiger silhouette shot out from within his body. The tiger silhouette was about 300 meters long. Its limbs were strong and powerful, and its pressure was unparalleled. With a leap, it took the initiative to meet Yi Chen's palm. Yi Chen's expression was calm. He still struck out with his palm. A huge palm print swept across the sky like the heaven-flipping seal. It suppressed the tiger silhouette directly. Bang! The tiger silhouette was instantly destroyed, and the remaining palm print landed on the man in the bamboo hat. Blurger, the man in the bamboo hat, spat out a mouthful of blood and fell heavily to the ground. Cracks instantly appeared on his body, and his face looked like he had seen a ghost. What martial Tao is this? At the next moment, Yi Chen took a step forward and charged at him. The man's expression changed drastically when he saw that, and he hurriedly said, "You can't kill me. I'm the White Jade Capital's envoy." At that moment, he finally realized that Yi Chen's background might not be that simple. However, Yi Chen ignored his threat and pierced his head with a finger. The man's soul took the opportunity to form as if he was trying to escape. However, Yi Chen would not give him the chance. He exerted force in his palm and grabbed at the man's soul. The soul was terrified and could not help but roar, "Elder, save me, save me!" Almost at that moment, an extremely cold voice suddenly exploded in the air, "Brat, how dare you?" Boom! Suddenly, a huge hand descended from the sky and slapped down heavily. "I've been waiting for you for a long time. You finally can't take it anymore." Yi Chen crushed the man in the bamboo hat's shunhun. His body flashed and he threw a punch at the huge hand. Rumble! the entire space shook violently, and a muffled groan could be faintly heard. When everyone reacted, they realized that the huge hand in the sky had disappeared. Replacing it was a large amount of blood mist that scattered down. However, the surroundings were dead silent. Everyone stared blankly at this scene. Especially Yun-yi, her face was filled with disbelief. The White Jade Capital's envoy died just like that? And what was that mysterious giant hand? Was it the most powerful person in the White Jade Capital? At that moment, Yi-Chen leaped and shot into the green clouds directly. Yun-yi said instinctively, "Mr. Yi, I'll go meet this so-called White Jade Capital. You guys stay here and wait for me to come back." Yi-Chen's voice appeared in her mind. Subsequently, Yun-yi and the rest moved like ghosts. Mr. Yi was going to kill his way into the White Jade Capital? Wasn't that too crazy? In the depths of the void, Yi-Chen carried his daughter and stepped into the sky. There was a divine light in his eyes that pierced through the void. The appearance of the huge hand earlier had exposed the location of the White Jade Capital. It was in the 9th heaven. End of this chapter. Chapter 1101. Above the clouds, in the darkness, a massive island sat in the void. If an ordinary person saw it, they would definitely be so shocked that they would be speechless. The island was like a city in outer space. Cranes cried out in unison, and there were also countless beasts galloping around. As the saying went, the White Jade Capital in the sky had 12 buildings and 5 cities. Immortals caressed my head, and I received eternal life. This was where the White Jade Capital was located. At that moment, an old man with white eyebrows grunted in a celestial mountain in the White Jade Capital. He pulled back his severed right arm and spat out blood. There was a basin of water before him. He had pulled his arm out of the water, but the water in the basin was already dyed red with blood. How powerful! The old man with white eyebrows ignored his pain. He looked extremely shocked. This person must be a martial saint. Why is there such a ferocious person in the north? I've offended this person for the sake of a disciple. With this person's methods, he'll definitely be able to track me down. He might even cause great trouble for the White Jade Capital. Looks like I'll have to meet the Supreme Elder. He's the most suitable person to deal with this. The old man with white eyebrows' expression changed a few times as he thought to there. He immediately turned into a streak of light and flew toward the highest mountain. It was a snowy mountain that was so tall that one could not see its end. If one looked closely, one would realize that it looked like a giant finger. Ordinary people would not be able to reach the top even if they tried their best. At the top of the mountain was a vast expanse of whiteness, as if it was a world of ice and snow. In the middle of it, there was an old man wearing a straw cape, sitting upright without moving. The old man seemed to be fishing, and there was a huge cave of ice before him. However, what was shocking was that there was no thread or hook in his hand. Instead, there was a long white thread that shot out of his hand and into the cave of ice. At that moment, a streak of light landed on the top of the mountain. It was the old man with white eyebrows. The old man with white eyebrows knelt on one knee and said, "Supreme Elder, the White Jade Capital has provoked a great enemy." However, the old man before him remained motionless like an ice sculpture that would not melt for 1,000 years. The old man with white eyebrows gritted his teeth and told the old man everything that had happened. A few seconds later, a faint sigh was heard. A great dynasty? A young expert suspected to be a martial saint. Surprisingly, the motionless old man slowly turned his head and looked at him expressionlessly. Exactly. The white-browed old man hurriedly nodded. The next moment, the straw-caped old man slowly stretched out his hand, and the old man was horrified to discover a horrifying power of the world attacking him. A mountain suddenly descended from the void. His entire body was smashed down from the sky by the huge mountain, and in the end, he was completely suppressed under the mountain, with only his head sticking out. The commotion shocked everyone in the White Jade Capital. The white-browed old man was horrified. "Supreme Elder, why is that?" Do you still remember my words? The straw-caped old man's calm voice rang out in the young man's mind. I've said this before. The founding master of the great dynasty has a history with the White Jade Capital. Anyone from the White Jade Capital mustn't pressure him too much. Although I've been fishing here for 1,000 years, do you really think that I don't know all of this? Hearing this, the white-browed elder felt extremely regretful. Although the matter regarding the acting king was not his own intention and had been done by his follower, how could he not have tacitly agreed to it? The straw-caped old man's voice rang out again. I'll suppress you for 100 years as a punishment. Do you submit? I submit. The white-browed old man was filled with regret. The straw-caped old man withdrew his gaze and looked quietly into the ice cave. He mumbled, a young expert suspected to be a martial saint. This person is definitely not from the northern region. Could he be the demon that has caused a commotion in the southern region recently? Or is he someone from one of the supreme sects in the Central Plains? His eyes flickered. At that moment, he seemed to sense something and smiled. Fellow cultivator, since you're here, why don't you come up and have a seat? As soon as he finished speaking, the many White Jade Capital experts at the foot of the mountain were shocked, and they all looked toward the White Jade Capital's barrier passage. There, they saw a white-haired young man walking over slowly with a little girl in his arms. His white hair was like a chain that could turn all living things upside down. Just as someone tried to stop him, the straw-caped old man calmly said, "An esteemed guest has arrived. All of you, step back." Yes. Everyone agreed immediately. Yi Chen looked around the White Jade Capital calmly. Eventually, he took a step forward and landed next to the straw-caped old man at the top of the mountain. "Fellow, please wait for me for 15 minutes. I've waited for this little serpent for hundreds of years." The straw-caped old man smiled and looked into the ice cave again. The sound of a serpent could be faintly heard. Snow serpent. Yi Chen also looked into the ice cave. He squinted slightly as surprise flashed through his eyes. The so-called snow serpent was a serpent that lived under ice and snow. The blood of such a creature was incomparably precious. It could help one temper one's body and blood. "Fellow, you know about this?" The straw-caped old man's eyes gleamed. At that moment, his fear of Yi Chen grew. After all, snow serpents were extremely rare. Only a handful of people in the world knew about them. Roar! At that moment, the sound of the serpent in the ice cave became even more intense. Then, the hard ice layer broke open, and a white serpent that was more than 60 meters long broke out of the ice. The white serpent roared at the straw-caped old man repeatedly as if it was filled with resentment. If one took a closer look, they would notice that the white thread in the old man's hand had passed through its mouth. 1,000 years ago, you little serpent took advantage of the fact that I was lazy to hide in the ice layer. The straw-caped old man shook his head slightly and seemed to be scolding it jokingly. I've been using true energy and medicinal pills to nurture you day and night. Now I just want to take a little of your serpent blood to go with my wine. Are you that unwilling? I want freedom, the white serpent spoke in human language. It was a female voice, and it was very angry. For the past 1,000 years, you've been taking my serpent blood to go with your wine every once in a while. Are you treating me as a long-term meal ticket? Ha ha ha. The straw-caped old man immediately laughed out loud when he heard that. Don't worry, I guarantee that this will be the last time. I'll set you free after taking it. The fellow beside me can testify. The white serpent looked at Yi Chen vigilantly. It seemed to have sensed that he was not to be trifled with. It then asked the old man to take out a portion of the serpent blood and put it in the ice pot. Go, it's best if you head east. The old man put away the thread in the white serpent's mouth. The white serpent let out a long roar and shot out. It was really heading east. The old man raised his hand and waved. 2 stools and a wine set appeared in front of him. He carefully poured the serpent blood in the ice pot and mixed it with a secret wine. He waved his hand, and a cup of blood-red serpent blood wine landed next to Yi Chen. Fellow, do you dare to drink this cup? End of this chapter. Chapter 1102. Yi Chen smiled lightly and put down the little girl in his embrace. He then finished the cup of wine brewed with flood dragon blood. As soon as the flood dragon blood entered his throat, it turned into a bone-piercing chill that flowed through his limbs and finally into his stomach. Great wine! He could not help but nod in admiration. Seeing that, the little girl picked up the empty cup and licked it with her tongue. Her eyes lit up immediately. Daddy, I want to drink too. Before Yi Chen could say anything, the old man shook his head, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Not everyone can drink my wine. The flood dragon blood wine was cold and strong. Although it had been diluted, even an ordinary martial king would not be able to tolerate the energy in a single drop. Yet, the little girl wanted to drink it too. Grandpa, don't laugh. The little girl was a little unhappy. She glared at the old man and turned around to act coquettishly to Yi Chen. Daddy, I want to drink too. Yi Chen then looked at the old man in the straw cape. The latter hesitated for a moment and poured a cup for the little girl in the end. He could not help but say, Fellow, this wine is extraordinary. Before he could finish, he noticed that the little girl had picked up the wine cup and gulped it down. After that, she even wiped her mouth and looked at the former in anticipation. The old man's expression froze, but he still poured another cup for the little girl. The little girl still gulped it down and burped. She raised her little face and looked at the former. Grandpa, is there more? And no more. The old man in the straw cape hurriedly covered the ice pot. His face twitched and he was shocked. Even he could only drink 5 cups of this wine at once. Otherwise, he would not be able to resist the energy in the flood dragon blood. He could completely understand that Yi Chen could drink 1 cup with his ability. However, the 6-year-old girl drank 2 cups in a row. It shocked him. He had no idea that the little girl had been eating Yi Chen's medicinal pills like candy since she was young. Coupled with a drop of Yi Chen's heart blood protecting her, her physique had been changed subtly. Looking at the little girl's pitiful eyes, the old man hid the kettle well. He then looked at Yi Chen and coughed. My disciple has no intention of offending you. I apologize to you. From the moment Yi Chen came in, he had been observing Yi Chen. Although he could not sense any aura from Yi Chen at all, he could not help but feel a chill down his spine. But the more it was like this, the more he feared it. Yi Chen looked at him quietly and smiled lightly. If I'm not mistaken, you're the White Jade Capital's patriarch, right? The straw-caped old man poured him another cup of wine and pushed it over. I'm Yu Jingzi, the White Jade Capital's Grand Supreme Elder. May I know who you are? Grandpa, didn't you say that you don't have any left? Liar, you're a liar. The little fellow immediately rushed over angrily. Yu Jingzi was speechless. Yi Chen said calmly, so it's fellow Yu Jing. I'm Mad Southern Yi. I'm just passing by the northern region and have some connections with the great dynasty. Your disciple spoke rudely to me and even attacked me. That's why I killed him. He could sense Yu Jingzi's kindness, which caused the killing intent that he had accumulated to dissipate. That was how he was. If you respect me, I'll respect you 10 times. So it's fellow Yi. Yu Jingzi smiled and said, Fellow Yi, I'm sure you're not from the northern region, right? May I know where you're from? He did not hide the probing tone in his words. After all, at his level, it would be easier for both parties to be suspicious if he was being secretive. Moreover, Yi Chen's youth surprised him. He had never seen such a monstrous existence in the northern region. That's right. Yi Chen nodded lightly and did not say much. Instead, he went straight to the point and said, I'll get straight to the point. I'm here to make sure that the White Jade Capital won't attack the great dynasty in the future. Otherwise, I wouldn't mind seeking your guidance today. At this point, the smile on his face gradually turned cold. Fellow Yi, you might not know this, but the founding emperor of the great dynasty was once a disciple of the White Jade Capital. He thought that Yu Jingzi would not be able to reveal it, but the latter nodded in agreement. Therefore, the Great Dynasty is also considered a part of the White Jade capital. The reason for this misunderstanding is that my disciple didn't know about it. That's for the best. Yi Chen nodded and suddenly changed the topic. Other than that, I have a question that I hope you can answer. Of course, I won't let you suffer a loss. Naturally, I'll compensate you. A purple medicinal pill appeared in his hand. The medicinal pill's fragrance spread everywhere, and there was a faint dragon and tiger phenomenon. This pill is called the Spirit Void pill. It can increase your cultivation base. As soon as that was said, Yu Jingzi's expression changed. May I know what you don't understand? Yi Chen said, a year and a half ago, a netherworld ship appeared on the northern region's vast ocean. May I ask if you've seen it? As soon as he finished speaking, Yu Jingzi's calm pupils constricted slightly. Yu Jingzi's calm pupils constricted slightly. He then looked at Yi Chen steadily. Fellow, are you from Zhongzhou? Why do you say that? Yi Chen was delighted and said, I'm from the Tianfeng Sea area, not Zhongzhou. Yu Jingzi took a deep look at him, then looked at the Spirit Void pill. After a few seconds of silence, he said, since that's the case, I advise you not to ask about this matter, fellow Taoist. Otherwise, it'll only bring disaster upon you. He was the master of the White Jade capital and the northern region's #1. His cultivation base had long reached the martial saint stage. However, he still could not forget what happened a year and a half ago. Yi Chen secretly frowned. His tone was slightly cold. Fellow, I have to know about this. I hope you can help me. Yu Jingzi's reaction proved that he did know about the ghost ship. How could Yi Chen miss this opportunity at a time like this? He had already done his etiquette. If Yu Jingzi refused to tell him, he did not mind attacking. As if sensing the coldness in his words, Yu Jingzi sighed softly. Fellow, can you swear that you won't implicate me if I tell you? He was unwilling to fight Yi Chen. Firstly, he did not know Yi Chen's cultivation base. He vaguely felt that Yi Chen gave him a sense of danger. Secondly, he did not know Yi Chen's background. Yi Chen's eyes focused when he heard that. He did not expect a martial saint to be so afraid. He immediately said, I can swear that I won't implicate you. Otherwise, I'll be destroyed by the heavens and abandoned by the gods. With that, he flicked his finger, and the Spirit Void pill landed in Yu Jingzi's hand. Yu Jingzi waved his sleeve, and the scene before them changed. When they appeared again, they were already in a sealed cave abode. This is my place of closed-door cultivation. There's a formation around it that can avoid the detection of those existences. Yu Jingzi took a deep breath in and said slowly, Fellow Yi, I've indeed seen that netherworld ship. End of this chapter. Chapter 1103. Fellow Taoist Yi, this old man has indeed seen that netherworld ship. In the secret chamber, Yi Chen's eyes were fixed on Yu Jingzi as soon as he finished speaking. He was right. Yu Jingzi was the supreme elder of the White Jade capital, a giant in the northern region. He was also the only martial saint in the northern region. Even the slightest disturbance in the northern region could not escape his eyes. He didn't say a word and motioned for Yu Jingzi to continue. 1.5 years ago, someone from my White Jade capital reported that an underworld ship had appeared on the vast sea. Yu Jingzi took a deep breath and said as if he was reminiscing, I didn't plan to pay attention to this matter, but at that time, several great figures from the Central Plains came to the northern region and forced me to use the power of the sect to help them. The important figures of the Central Plains. Yi Chen squinted slightly. Not bad. Yu Jingzi nodded slightly. These people's origins are very mysterious, and their strength is extremely terrifying. Even I can't be certain of their identities, but I can roughly guess where they come from. These people are all martial saints. Yi Chen frowned. The martial saints of the ancient barren world were no different from the saints on earth. In China, other than him and Ing, only Zi Qingtsang of the Kunlun ruins had reached the Saint Plain. These 5 people are martial sages. This old man has never come into contact with them before. However, due to the circumstances, I had no choice but to send people to search for them. Yu Jingzi gently nodded. In the end, they found the whereabouts of the underworld ship in the western part of the vast sea. The 5 of them directly joined hands and killed their way onto the underworld ship. As soon as he said that, Yi Chen's heart skipped a beat. The 5 saints joined hands to attack the netherworld ship. Even with his peak combat power on Earth, he could not guarantee that he could fight against 5 sages at the same time. Thinking to this point, he suppressed the shock in his heart and asked, "Who are the people on the ship?" "It seems to be a crazy Taoist, a man and 3 women." Yu Jingzi's words caused his expression to change. Although I wasn't there at the time, I spread out my mental energy to investigate the scene. At this point, a trace of fear appeared on his face. At that time, the 5 martial saints joined forces to fight that Taoist. However, 3 of them died at his hands. As long as one stepped into the martial saint realm, one could be said to be completely above all living beings. Unless the heavens and earth underwent a great change, it would be very difficult for one to die. However, he would never forget the strange phenomenon of a saint falling in the northern sky that day. There was even a mist of blood in the void. That crazy Taoist crossed the void with one hand, and a strand of white hair cut off the entire ocean. This was also the reason why he had never dared to reveal it. Yi Chen said, "The other 2 escaped?" He thought he had overestimated the strength of the crazy Taoist. Unexpectedly, the real combat ability of the crazy Taoist was beyond his expectation again. Even with 5 martial sages working together, Xiao Chun still managed to kill 3 of them. Such a person was truly frightening. "No." Yu Jingzi shook his head and said, "Even though 3 martial saints died, the Taoist was also severely injured. Because of this, he slapped the netherworld ship to the end of the vast sea and stayed behind to fight the remaining 2 martial saints." "What happened next?" Yi Chen asked impatiently. Yu Jingzi said slowly, "Later, the Taoist and the 2 martial saints disappeared, along with the underworld ship." "Where's the end of the Immensity Sea?" Yi Chen asked. Yu Jingzi couldn't help but look at him. "There are 2 places at the end of the Immensity Sea. One is the Tianfeng Sea area, and the other is the East Barren Territory." "Why do you say that?" Yi Chen was confused. Previously, Yun Yi had told him that the Immensity Sea was part of the Heavenly Wind Sea region. If that was the case, then the underworld ship must be heading towards the Heavenly Wind Sea region. "There's something fellow Taoist Yi doesn't know." Yu Jingzi shook his head and said, "The Tianfeng Sea area stretches across 5 great territories. Although the Hanhai is part of the Tianfeng Sea area, it is located between the northern region and the Eastern Barren Territory." Yi Chen secretly frowned upon hearing that. He had to make a choice. He could either go to the Eastern Barren Territory or the Tianfeng Sea area. Of course, there was a third choice, which was the Zhongzhou of the 5 great territories. After all, the 5 martial saints came from Zhongzhou, and their target was the underworld ship. It was very likely that Su Yuhan and the rest would appear in Zhongzhou. While he was deep in thought, Yu Jingzi was also quietly sizing him up. He could not help but ask, "Fellow, what's your relationship with the people on the underworld ship? Since you're not willing to get involved in their grudges, it's better for you to know less," Yi Chen said casually. Yu Jingzi's heart skipped a beat and he said gratefully, "Thank you for the reminder, fellow." At his level, there were very few people in the entire ancient, desolate realm who could compare to him. He could be said to be standing at the top of the world. However, he would also have many concerns. The biggest one was karma. As the saying went, karma was heartless. Once he was involved, he might die. Subsequently, Yi Chen chatted with him for a while before leaving with his daughter. After sensing that he had left the White Jade Jing, Yu Jingzi's expression kept changing. He did not say a word. At this moment, a middle-aged man silently appeared and hesitated to speak. "Ancestor, Why did you tell this person about that matter? Do you want to ask why I'm being so polite? Yu Jingzi smiled calmly. Not bad. The middle-aged man braced himself and said, even if he's a martial sacred, he's not a match for the progenitor. Besides, the incident back then involved the Middle Continent. If they find out, Yu Jingzi took a good look at the direction where Yi Chen had left and smiled calmly. Although this man didn't reveal anything, I can still guess that he's related to the crazy priest on the spirit ship. Ancestor, all the more we can't let him go. The middle-aged man stomped his feet. On the contrary, we should inform the central prefecture. Perhaps the White Jade capital can use this opportunity to ascend to the central prefecture. Fool! Yu Jingzi scolded. Who can guarantee that the crazy Taoist is dead or alive? Who could be sure that this kid was not a descendant of the crazy Taoist? If we take a wrong step, our White Jade capital will be annihilated. His words immediately caused the middle-aged man's heart to skip a beat. That was right. That crazy Taoist did not die from the combined attacks of 5 martial sacred. He even killed 3 martial sacred in a row. What if he did not die and killed his way into the White Jade capital? How could the progenitor defend against him alone? From now on, you are not allowed to provoke the major dynasties, and you are not allowed to interfere in the secular world. Yu Jingzi turned around and left after saying that. The middle-aged man also went to give the order. What they did not know was that not long after he left, the space where he was standing rippled slightly. Then Yi Chen's figure appeared. Yi Chen's eyes flickered a few times as he said calmly, "This person is quite sensible. He saved me a lot of trouble." End of this chapter. Chapter 1104. The Grand Dynasty, Longjing City. Yun-Yi stood on the city wall, her beautiful eyes fixed on the void, as if there was something there that she could not bear to look away from. 2 hours had passed. Many people had left. In the end, only a palace maid and many guards remained by her side. A palace maid came forward with a coat and said, "Empress Dowager, it's cold. Put on some clothes." The snow had melted. Following the death of the White Jade capital, the heavy snow that enveloped the entire Grand Dynasty gradually disappeared. However, the melting snow became even colder. "You guys can leave. I want some peace and quiet." Yun-Yi's expression did not change. The others did not dare to say anything and could only leave. They stood far away as if they were worried about her. "Mr. Yi, are you still alive?" Yun-Yi stared blankly at the void, her hands clenched tightly unconsciously. Until now, she still could not believe that Yi Chen dared to kill his way into the White Jade capital. This idea was simply too crazy. Just a single envoy from the White Jade capital was enough to render her sect powerless, let alone the entire White Jade capital. At this moment, Yun-Yi's beautiful eyes suddenly shook, and a hint of surprise appeared on her beautiful face. In her line of sight, a thin figure walked through the air and landed beside her. "Mr. Yi," Yun-Yi could not help but be overjoyed. Yi Chen nodded slightly. Then, he looked at the snow that was gradually dispersing around him, and said coldly, "I've already talked to the White Jade capital's Supreme Elder. From now on, I won't cause trouble for your sect anymore." What? Yun-Yi could not believe it. The White Jade capital's Supreme Elder? Mr. Yi could actually talk to the White Jade capital's Supreme Elder? Before she could react, Yi Chen said again, "I promised Qi Tiandao to protect your sect for 3 months. However, now that your sect's crisis has been resolved, it's time for me to leave." Before this, the biggest crisis of the Grand Dynasty was the 8 kings who rebelled and the White Jade capital. However, with the death of the acting king, the other 7 kings fought on their own. In addition, the White Jade capital had compromised. Currently, the only enemy of the Grand Dynasty was the Qing dynasty. There would definitely be war between the 2 countries. However, Yi Chen did not plan to interfere. If the Grand Dynasty could not even deal with the Empire, there was no need for it to exist. As soon as he finished speaking, Yi Chen's expression changed. Yun-Yi was startled at first, Then her delicate body trembled slightly. Her face suddenly became somewhat pale. A few seconds later, she took a deep breath and bit her lip. When do we set off? Tomorrow morning. Yi Chen spoke slowly. He had yet to make a decision on whether to go to the eastern wilderness, the heavenly wind sea area, or the central plains. Yun Yi's expression was incomparably complicated. All right, at night, Yi Chen stayed in the residence that Yun Yi had arranged for him. He meditated secretly while the little girl was asleep. Not long after, the silence was broken. A weak knock came from outside. "Mr. Yi, it's me, Lu Fei." Yi Chen frowned and got up to walk out of the room. He then pushed the door of the residence open and saw the former standing outside with a carriage next to him. After learning of King Langya's death, Lu Fei had been living in pain for the past few days. She had only walked out of it today. Even so, there was still a hint of sorrow between her brows. "Mr. Yi, the Empress Dowager has invited you. She said that she has prepared a gift for you." "A gift?" Yi Chen was slightly stunned. He then turned around and entered the house to carry his daughter from the bed. The little girl, who was sleeping soundly, turned around and could not stop smacking her lips as if she was dreaming of delicious food. Deep in the palace, Yi Chen rode a carriage all the way to the entrance of an extremely luxurious palace. No one dared to stop him. "Mr. Yi, we're here." Lu Fei came out to welcome her, bowed and said, "Empress Dowager only summoned you. I will temporarily help you carry Meng Meng." At that moment, the little girl was woken up by the bumpy carriage. She hugged Yi Chen's neck and said, "Daddy, where are we?" "Meng Meng, can I bring you to eat delicious food? There's something fun," Lu Fei said with incomparable love. Sure, the little girl struggled to get out of Yi Chen's embrace and ran into Lu Fei's embrace. "Mr. Yi, the Empress Dowager is waiting for you inside." Lu Fei smiled and left with the little girl before Yi Chen could say anything. Along the way, the two of them giggled. Yi Chen rubbed his nose and looked at the empty palace before him. Eventually, he stepped in. There was a red carpet in the palace with bead curtains hanging high. The red candles were dazzling, and there was sandalwood fragrance lingering in the air. It made everything look very charming. As soon as Yi Chen entered, he lifted his eyes and looked around. However, he realized that there was nobody there. There was only the faint sound of water behind the screen far away. Through the candlelight, there was a naked silhouette who seemed to be bathing. Helplessness flashed through Yi Chen's eyes. At this point, if he still did not realize what was going on, he would seem a little stupid. He turned around and was about to leave when he saw the door close slowly. Subsequently, an extremely gentle voice came from behind him. "Mr. Yi, please wait." The screen was slowly lifted up, and a large red bed was immediately exposed to the air. A fragile leg slowly extended out from the mosquito net, and then completely opened the mosquito net. Yi Chen's expression was rather unnatural. What came into view was a graceful figure wrapped in a red girdle lying on the bed. With the help of the moonlight that shone in, the slender body was trembling slightly, and the side of her face, which had her head lowered, was blushing. Yi Chen took a deep breath in and forced himself to get rid of the distracting thoughts in his mind. He said while forcing a smile, "Empress Dowager, I told you before." Without waiting for him to finish speaking, the beautiful figure flashed and landed on the ground. A phoenix robe tightly wrapped around her body. The former turned around slightly and looked at Yi Chen with her beautiful eyes. "There's no Empress Dowager here tonight. There's only a woman called Yun Yi." As soon as she finished speaking, she grabbed at the banquet that had already been prepared, and a pair of cups fell into her hands. 2 cups of wine were filled. Yun Yi covered her face with her sleeve and finished the wine in the cup in one gulp. She then looked at Yi Chen. "Mr. Yi, would you like to drink with me?" Yi Chen sighed softly. He could only grab the cup of wine and finish it in one gulp. However, he realized that as soon as the wine entered his stomach, he felt a faint burning sensation. His expression was a little unnatural. How could he not know what had been put in the wine? He then said coldly, Miss Yun, please behave yourself. The former looked at him in a daze, and then a stream of tears slowly fell. Can you stay? I'm willing to give you this world. End of this chapter.